A little girl sketches the face of the loneliest man in the city, and against all odds, he asks to meet her. At first, it feels like a miracle hope, laughter, and a chance at a brighter future. Whispers turn into rumors. Rumors turn into attacks. And suddenly, the lives of a struggling single mom and her children are thrown into a storm of lies, power, and betrayal. Can compassion break through prejudice? Can love survive when the truth isn't what anyone expected? Or will this chance at family be torn apart before it even begins? Before we get into the story, comment below where in the world you are watching from today. The morning sun filtered through the worn curtains of Elena's small apartment, casting warm patches across the scratched kitchen table. Joy sat quietly, her pencil moving in careful strokes across her sketchbook, while her mother hustled Noah through their morning routine. "Noah, honey, please put your shoes on the right feet this time," Elena called out, her voice patient despite the early hour. She moved swiftly between the kitchen and living room, packing lunchboxes and checking backpacks. Joy's eyes drifted to the magazine that lay forgotten on the edge of the table. It was one of those business journals Elena sometimes brought home from her cleaning job at the high-rise apartments. The cover showed a man in an expensive suit, Graham Whitlock, standing before floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. His pose was meant to look powerful, but Joy saw something else in his eyes. She turned to a fresh page in her sketchbook, her pencil beginning to trace the lines of his face. But where the magazine showed confidence, Joy's careful strokes revealed the loneliness she'd glimpsed. She softened his stern expression, drew shadows that spoke of quiet evenings alone, added depth to his eyes that reflected an empty home. "Joy, sweetie, finish up your breakfast," Elena reminded her, rushing past with Noah's dinosaur-printed backpack. "We need to leave in 10 minutes. "Yes, Mama," Joy replied, but her hand kept moving across the paper. She'd seen Mr. Whitlock once, 2 days ago, when she'd accompanied her mother to work because school was closed for teacher training. He'd been standing at his window, looking down at the city, wearing that same expression she was now capturing in her drawing. Noah bounded into the kitchen, his shoes finally on the correct feet. "I did it, Mama! Look!" He crashed into Elena's legs, nearly causing her to spill the coffee she was hurriedly drinking. "Good job, my amor," Elena smiled, steadying herself. She ran a hand through Noah's unruly hair, attempting to smooth it down. "Now, where's your sweater?" While Noah darted off to find his missing clothing, Elena glanced at Joy's sketchbook. "What are you drawing, mija?" Joy instinctively covered her work with her arm. "Just something I saw," she mumbled, not wanting to explain. She knew her mother would worry if she knew Joy was drawing one of the wealthy residents. A knock at the door interrupted any further questions. "Come in," Elena called out, recognizing Pastor Miller's familiar pattern of knocks. The door opened, and Pastor Miller's tall frame filled the doorway. His kind face broke into a warm smile as he entered. "Good morning, Cruz family. I hope I'm not too early for those donations you mentioned, Elena." "Not at all, Pastor. The bags are right here." Elena gestured to 2 neat garbage bags full of clothes the children had outgrown. "Though I wish we had more to give." "Every little bit helps, sister," Pastor Miller assured her, picking up the bags. His eyes fell on Joy's sketchbook, and he tilted his head with interest. "What do you have there, Joy?" Before Joy could hide it, Pastor Miller had already seen the drawing. His eyebrows rose in recognition. "Is that Graham Whitlock?" Elena's head snapped around, and Joy hunched her shoulders, expecting a scolding. But Pastor Miller was already moving closer, his expression thoughtful. "Joy, this is remarkable," he said softly. "You've captured something here that all those professional photographs miss." Elena came to look over Joy's shoulder, her breath catching as she saw the sketch. The Graham Whitlock on Joy's paper wasn't the untouchable billionaire from the magazine. He was simply a man, standing alone, looking out at a city that felt too big, too empty. "The loneliest man in the city," Joy whispered, adding one final shadow to the window behind her subject. Pastor Miller exchanged a glance with Elena. "You know," he said carefully, "we're having that fundraiser for the Community Arts Center next week. Would you allow us to display this drawing, Joy?" Joy's eyes widened, and she looked up at her mother. Elena's face showed a flash of uncertainty. She'd always been careful about drawing attention to their family. But seeing the hope in her daughter's eyes, the pride in her work, Elena felt her protective instincts soften. "What do you think, Mija?" Elena asked, placing a gentle hand on Joy's shoulder. "It's your drawing. Your choice." Joy looked down at her sketch, then back up at Pastor Miller's encouraging smile. She nodded slowly. Elena leaned down and pressed a kiss to the top of Joy's head, watching as her daughter's face lit up with a bright smile. Pastor Miller beamed at them both, careful not to crease the drawing, as he admired it one more time. Noah chose that moment to reappear, sweater in hand. "I found it, Mama. It was under my bed with the Legos. And probably just as wrinkled." Elena sighed, but her voice was warm with affection. She helped Noah into his sweater, while Joy carefully tore the page from her sketchbook and handed it to Pastor Miller. "I'll make sure it's properly mounted and protected," Pastor Miller promised, handling the sketch like it was made of gold rather than printer paper. "Thank you, Joy. Sometimes God gives us special gifts not just for ourselves, but to help us see each other better." Elena checked the clock and startled. "Oh, we need to go, or we'll be late." She began herding her children toward the door, gathering bags and keys. Pastor Miller stepped aside, holding the door open for them. "I'll see you all on Sunday," he said, watching as Elena guided her little family out into the morning sunshine. Joy's sketchbook clutched tightly to her chest as they hurried toward another busy day. The church basement hummed with conversation as donors mingled around tables decorated with paper flowers and battery-operated candles. Joy's drawing sat on a wooden easel near the refreshment table, illuminated by a small spotlight Pastor Miller had borrowed from the choir room. Elena smoothed down her best dress, a navy blue number she'd found at the thrift store last spring, and tried to blend into the background. She'd positioned herself near a potted plant, keeping an eye on Noah as he charmed elderly church ladies out of extra cookies, while Joy sat quietly at a corner table, working on a new sketch. "Is that really Graham Whitlock?" A woman in a pearl necklace leaned closer to the drawing, her wine glass tilting precariously. "I'd know that face anywhere. My husband's company does business with his." "It is," her companion confirmed, adjusting her glasses. "But I've never seen him look quite so human." Elena's fingers tightened around her plastic cup of punch. She'd been hearing variations of this conversation all evening, each new viewer discovering something different in Joy's simple lines and careful shadows. "The artist really captured something here," a man in a business suit commented to Pastor Miller. "There's a vulnerability you never see in his public appearances." Pastor Miller nodded, his kind face glowing with pride. "One of our youngest church members drew it. She has quite a gift for seeing past the surface." "A child drew this?" The man's eyebrows shot up. "Remarkable. Simply remarkable." A young woman with trendy glasses and a messenger bag slung across her chest pushed through the small crowd. Elena recognized her as Sarah Chen, who ran a popular local blog about city life and culture. Sarah pulled out her phone, adjusting her position until she found the perfect angle to photograph the drawing. "This is exactly the kind of hidden gem my readers love," Sarah murmured, tapping at her screen. "The contrast between wealth and emotional poverty, captured by an innocent hand, perfect." Elena wanted to step forward, to say something about privacy and permission, but she held back. Pastor Miller had already gotten her consent to display the drawing. She couldn't control what happened next, no matter how much her protective instincts flared. "Mama?" Noah appeared at her side, cookie crumbs on his chin. "Can I go sit with Joy?" "Yes, mi amor." Elena smiled, grateful for the distraction. "But no touching her drawings without permission, remember?" Noah nodded solemnly and made his way to his sister's table. Elena watched as Joy automatically shifted her current sketch away from his reaching hands, but then smiled and tore out a blank page for him to draw on. The evening wore on. More people commented on the drawing. Donations for the Arts Center flowed steadily into the collection box. Elena helped serve coffee and cleared away empty plates, falling into the familiar rhythm of service work to steady her nerves. "Elena." Pastor Miller's voice was gentle as he approached her by the coffee urn. "You should be mingling, not working. You're a guest tonight." She shook her head, managing a small smile. I'm more comfortable keeping busy, Pastor. You know that. I do, he agreed, then lowered his voice. But I also know you're worried about the attention Joy's drawing is getting. Remember what we talked about in counseling? Sometimes blessings come in unexpected packages. Elena's response was interrupted by a burst of excitement from the crowd around the easel. Sarah Chen was showing something on her phone to a cluster of people, their faces lit by the screen's blue glow. It's already got hundreds of likes, Sarah exclaimed, and dozens of shares. People are asking who the artist is. Elena's heart skipped a beat. She pulled out her own phone, an older model with a cracked screen, and opened the local community forum she followed. There it was, a crisp photo of Joy's drawing, accompanied by Sarah's thoughtful commentary about art and humanity in unexpected places. Comments were flowing in. Wait, is that really Graham Whitlock? Who drew this? It's amazing. I've never seen him look so real. Someone needs to show this to him. The post was being shared across other local platforms, gathering momentum like a snowball rolling downhill. Elena's fingers trembled as she scrolled through the responses. Mama? Joy's soft voice startled her. Elena looked down to find her daughter standing beside her, dark eyes serious in her round face. Is everything okay? Elena quickly locked her phone screen. Yes, mija, everything's fine. Are you ready to go home? It's getting late. Joy nodded, but her expression remained thoughtful as they collected Noah and said their goodbyes. Pastor Miller insisted on walking them to their car, helping Noah with his seatbelt, while Elena got Joy settled. We'll keep the drawing safe until next Sunday, he assured them. And Elena, try not to worry too much. Sometimes God works in mysterious ways. The drive home was quiet, Noah dozing in his car seat, while Joy gazed out the window at the city lights. Elena could see the Whitlock Tower in the distance, its upper floors glowing like a lighthouse against the dark sky. Later, after the children were tucked into bed, Elena sat on the edge of her own bed and opened her phone again. The post had exploded. Local news sites were picking up the story. Someone had tagged Graham Whitlock's company in the comments. Mama? Joy stood in the doorway in her faded pajamas, looking small and uncertain. You should be asleep, mija, Elena said softly, patting the bed beside her. Joy padded over and climbed up, peering at the phone screen. Is that my drawing? Yes, baby. A lot of people are seeing it now. They think it's very special. Joy was quiet for a moment, then whispered, Will he see it, Mommy? Elena looked down at her daughter's hopeful face, remembering the lonely man in the penthouse window and the unexpected truth Joy's pencil had revealed. She wrapped an arm around Joy's shoulders, drawing her close. Graham Whitlock stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows of his penthouse, hands clasped behind his back. The city sprawled before him, a maze of lights and shadows in the early evening. His reflection stared back crisp white shirt, perfectly pressed slacks, and eyes that looked as tired as he felt. Behind him, Marla Kenner's heels clicked against the marble floor. Graham, you need to see this. He turned from the window, noting the concerned pinch of her perfectly made-up face. Marla had been his PR chief for 5 years now, and that expression usually meant trouble. What is it? He moved to his desk, a massive piece of walnut that dominated one corner of his home office. A drawing. Marla positioned herself beside him, manicured fingernails tapping at her tablet screen. It's gone viral locally. Look. Graham leaned forward, squinting slightly at the image. His breath caught. The sketch was simple but powerful, a man in a suit, standing alone at a window, much like the one he'd just left. But it wasn't the technical skill that grabbed him, it was the emotion. The artist had somehow captured the weight of solitude that pressed down on his shoulders every evening when the meetings ended and the mask could finally drop. They're calling it The Loneliest Man in the City, Marla continued, her tone clipped. It's clearly meant to be you. We should get ahead of this, issue a statement. Who drew this? Graham interrupted softly, still studying the image. There was something in the lines, a gentleness that felt like understanding rather than judgment. Marla blinked, thrown off her practiced damage control speech. What? The artist. Who are they? It was displayed at some church fundraiser. Let me pull up the details. She swiped through several screens. Grace Community Church, The artist's name wasn't listed in the original post. Graham straightened, adjusting his cuffs, a nervous habit he'd never quite broken. Find them. Quietly. When Marla opened her mouth to protest, he held up a hand. No press releases, no statements, just find out who drew this. Graham, with all due respect, this could be the start of a PR nightmare. Someone's trying to paint you as human? A rare smile tugged at his mouth. Maybe that's not the worst thing. Marla's perfectly plucked eyebrows drew together. The board won't like it. Your image is carefully crafted. Vulnerable isn't part of the brand. The brand. Graham's voice went flat. He turned back to the window, to his own reflection laid over the city lights. Sometimes I wonder if that's all I am anymore. Don't be dramatic. Marla's tone softened slightly. I'll have the team look into it. Discreetly. But Graham? She waited until he met her eyes in the reflection. Be careful. Art like this. It has an agenda. After she left, Graham sat at his desk, the tablet propped in front of him. He studied the sketch again, noting details he'd missed at first glance. The way the man's shoulders curved slightly inward, the empty space around him, vast and echoing. The city beyond the window, so close yet untouchable. He pressed the intercom button. Sandra? His assistant's voice came through immediately. Yes, Mr. Whitlock? I need you to contact Grace Community Church. Find out everything you can about this drawing and who created it. And Sandra? He paused. Keep it low-key. No official channels. Of course, sir. I'll get right on it. Graham spent the next hour trying to focus on quarterly reports, but his eyes kept drifting to the sketch. Someone had seen him, really seen him. Not the carefully constructed image on magazine covers, not the billionaire philanthropist, but the man who stood alone in his tower every night, watching life happen far below. His phone buzzed. A text from Sandra. Artist identified. Joy Cruz, age 8. Drawing was submitted through her mother, Elena Cruz. Ms. Cruz works for Metropolitan Cleaning Services, one of our contracted companies. Graham sat back, surprised. A child. Of course. Only a child would see past the facade so easily. He typed a quick response. Contact Ms. Cruz. Set up a meeting. 3 floors below, Elena Cruz was finishing her evening rotation. Her cleaning cart squeaked slightly as she pushed it down the executive hallway, checking the last few offices. Her phone vibrated in her pocket, probably Lavi, asking about Sunday's choir practice. But when she finally had a moment to check her voicemail, the message made her pause mid-motion, carpet cleaner bottle frozen in her hand. Good evening, Miss Cruz. This is Sandra Wilson from Graham Whitlock's office. Mr. Whitlock would very much like to meet with you and your daughter regarding Joy's artwork. Please call us back at your earliest convenience to arrange a suitable time. Elena stared at her phone, her heart doing an odd little skip. She thought of Joy's innocent sketching, of the proud smile on her daughter's face when Pastor Miller had asked to display it. She hadn't expected this, hadn't expected anyone important to notice, let alone the subject himself. She glanced up at the ceiling, knowing that somewhere above her, in his glass tower, Graham Whitlock was probably still at his desk. The man her daughter had seen, and drawn, and named Lonely. Elena Cruz's small apartment filled with afternoon light as she paced between the kitchen and living room. Her work uniform hung pressed and ready for tonight's shift, but her mind wasn't on cleaning offices. It was stuck on the polite voice message from Graham Whitlock's office, playing over and over in her head. Joy sat at their worn kitchen table, pencil moving across paper as always, while Noah zoomed his favorite red toy car across the carpet, making engine noises. The familiar sounds of her children should have been comforting, but Elena's stomach was in knots. "Mama," Joy said quietly, looking up from her drawing. "I want to meet him. Please?" Elena stopped pacing and leaned against the counter, running a hand through her dark hair. "Mi amor, it's not that simple. She struggled to find the right words. "He's not like us. He lives in a different world." "But he looked sad in the picture," Joy insisted, her brown eyes earnest. "Maybe he needs friends." Noah crashed his car into the baseboard with a dramatic explosion sound. "Boom! Can I bring my cars to the big building, Mama?" "We haven't decided if we're going," Elena said firmly, though her resolve wavered at her children's eager faces. A knock at the door made her jump. The familiar rhythm, 2 quick taps, then 3 slow ones, told her it was Lavy Rhodes from next door. Elena opened the door to find her elderly neighbor holding a steaming pot. "I heard voices and figured you could use some soup," Lavy announced, making her way to the kitchen with the confidence of someone who had been bringing food over for years. Her silver hair was neat, as always, her clothes simple but pressed. "And maybe some sense talked into you," Elena couldn't help smiling. "Has the whole building heard about the drawing?" "Honey, the whole neighborhood's heard." Lavy set the pot down and started rummaging for bowls like she owned the place. "Pastor Miller's practically floating on air about it, says it's providence." "It's complicated, Lavy." Elena lowered her voice, though Joy was absorbed in her artwork again. "What if they want to use her drawing for publicity? What if reporters start asking questions?" Her voice caught. "What if they look into our background?" Lavy's wise eyes softened as she ladled out soup. "Elena Cruz, I've known you since you moved in here with a baby on your hip and another on the way. You've worked 3 jobs, never missed rent, and raised 2 beautiful children who love Jesus and their mama. You've got nothing to be ashamed of." "The world doesn't always see it that way," Elena murmured, accepting a bowl of soup that smelled like comfort itself. "Then the world needs its eyes opened." Lavy handed a bowl to Joy, who smiled her thanks. "Sometimes God answers prayers sideways, you know. We've all been praying for that arts program at the community center to get funded. Maybe this is His way of working on that." Noah abandoned his cars and climbed onto a kitchen chair, reaching for his own bowl. "Miss Lavy makes the best soup." "That's right, sugar." Lavy ruffled his hair. "And your mama makes the best decisions for her babies. But sometimes—" She fixed Elena with a knowing look. "Sometimes the best decision is to open a door God's clearly holding wide open." Elena stirred her soup, watching the vegetables swirl. "What if it's not God? What if it's just complicated?" "Life's always complicated, honey. That's why we pray for wisdom, not certainty." Lavy sat down, her joints creaking slightly. "Tell me what's really worrying you." Elena glanced at her children, then spoke softly. "We've been invisible for so long, Lavy, safe because nobody noticed us. And now suddenly we're not just visible. We're connected to one of the most powerful men in the city." "Mama," Joy said suddenly, "remember what Pastor Miller said about hiding your light under a basket?" Elena blinked, surprised to hear her own lessons echoed back at her. Lavy's warm laugh filled the kitchen. "Out of the mouths of babes," the older woman said. "That child's got more wisdom than half the deacons." Noah slurped his soup loudly. "Can I bring my cars?" "Not yet, Miho." Elena smoothed his hair. "We haven't decided—" "Yes, we have," Joy said with quiet certainty. "You're just scared, Mama, but it's okay to be scared and brave at the same time." Elena's eyes met Lavy's, finding strength in her neighbor's steady gaze. The afternoon light slanted through the windows, warming the small kitchen, and suddenly the space felt less like a hiding place and more like a launching pad. She reached for her phone. "What time is it?" she asked, more to herself than anyone else. "Time to trust," Lavy answered simply. Elena's fingers shook slightly as she dialed the number from the voicemail. It rang twice before a professional voice answered, "Mr. Whitlock's office." Elena took a deep breath, feeling Joy's hand slip into hers. "This is Elena Cruz. About my daughter's drawing." "Yes, Ms. Cruz? We're so glad you called back." The voice warmed considerably. "Mr. Whitlock would very much like to meet your daughter, and you, of course. Would Saturday afternoon be convenient?" Elena squeezed Joy's hand, drawing courage from her daughter's bright smile. "Yes," she said finally. "Saturday afternoon would be fine." After arranging the details and ending the call, Elena looked around her small kitchen. Lavy was gathering the empty soup bowls, humming an old hymn. Noah had returned to his cars, creating an elaborate crash scene. And Joy was already reaching for her sketchbook, her face glowing with possibility. "Well," Elena said softly, "I guess we're meeting a billionaire on Saturday." Graham Whitlock stood at his penthouse window, staring at the city sprawled 40 stories below. His reflection showed a man perfectly put together in an expensive suit, but inside he felt as awkward as a schoolboy before a dance. The afternoon sun streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows, highlighting dust motes that danced in the air despite the thorough cleaning service. "Remember, keep things brief and professional," Marla Kenner said, adjusting a vase of fresh flowers on the coffee table for the third time. "We don't want to encourage any expectations." Graham barely heard her. His attention was fixed on the small family emerging from the elevator and the security feed displayed on his phone. A mother and 2 children, the artist and her family. His throat felt tight. "Graham?" Marla's voice sharpened. "Are you listening? We need to maintain appropriate boundaries." "They're here," he said quietly, cutting her off. He slipped his phone into his pocket and straightened his tie, though it was already perfect. The doorbell chimed. Marla moved to answer it, but Graham waved her back. "I'll get it," he said, surprising himself with the firmness in his voice. This felt important somehow, personal. He opened the door to find Elena Cruz standing there, straight-backed and dignified, despite her obvious nervousness. She wore simple but neat clothes, dark pants and a blue blouse, and held her daughter's hand. The little boy clutched her other hand, half hiding behind her leg. "Mr. Whitlock," Elena said formally, "thank you for inviting us. Please, come in," Graham said, stepping back, "and call me Graham." The little girl, Joy, held a worn sketchbook close to her chest as she entered. Her eyes were huge as she took in the penthouse's spacious interior, but there was something steady in her gaze that made Graham feel seen in a way that made him both uncomfortable and curious. "I'm Joy," she said softly, "and this is my brother Noah." Noah peeked out from behind his mother, thumb creeping toward his mouth before Elena gently pulled it away. "Would you like something to drink?" Graham offered, gesturing toward the sitting area where Marla had arranged water, juice, and a plate of cookies. "Please, make yourselves comfortable." Elena guided her children to the cream-colored sofa. Joy perched on the edge, her sketchbook still hugged tight. Noah climbed up next to her, eyeing the cookies with obvious interest. Graham found himself hesitating, unsure where to sit. The formal armchair across from them felt too distant, too much like a business meeting. Instead, he did something that made Marla inhale sharply. He lowered himself to one knee in front of Joy, bringing himself to her eye level. "I saw your drawing," he said gently. "The one at the church fundraiser. You're very talented." Joy's fingers traced the edge of her sketchbook. "Thank you," she whispered. "May I ask, why did you draw me that way?" The girl glanced up at her mother, who nodded encouragingly. "I saw your picture in the magazine," Joy explained, her voice gaining a little strength. "And then I saw you up here one night when Mama was working." She pointed toward the windows. "You were standing just like that, looking out, and you looked." She paused, considering her words carefully. "You looked like you needed a friend." Graham felt something catch in his chest. The simple truth in her words struck deeper than any business proposal or news article ever had. "I drew you because nobody should be the loneliest man in the city," Joy continued, opening her sketchbook to show him more drawings. "See? These are all the people who work in your building. They're not lonely because they smile at each other. Even if they're tired, they help each other." Graham looked at the sketches, the security guard sharing his lunch with the delivery woman, the janitor teaching a young colleague how to properly mop the marble floors, the parking attendant helping an elderly resident with her groceries. Simple moments of human connection he'd never noticed, captured by this child's careful eye. Marla cleared her throat. "Mr. Whitlock, we should discuss the terms of—" But Graham wasn't listening. He was looking at Joy's latest sketch, one she'd apparently done while sitting there. It showed him kneeling exactly as he was now, but in the drawing, he was smiling. A laugh bubbled up from somewhere deep inside him, warm and genuine and completely unexpected. He couldn't remember the last time he'd laughed like that. The sound seemed to surprise everyone in the room, including himself. "Joy Cruz," he said, still smiling, "you have an extraordinary gift, not just for drawing, but for seeing what matters." He stood up, decision made. "I'd like to help other children develop their artistic talents the way you have. Would you allow me to fund the Community Arts Center in your name?" Elena straightened. "Mr. Whitlock, That's very generous, but a year's funding, Graham continued, warming to the idea. For supplies, teachers, scholarships for children who can't afford classes. The Joy Cruz Young Artists Program. He looked at Joy, whose eyes had grown even wider. What do you think? Joy looked up at her mother, then back at Graham. A small, bright smile spread across her face. Could other kids learn to draw happy things too? Absolutely, Graham said. That's exactly what they could learn. Then yes, please, Joy said softly, and Graham felt something shift in the air of his usually lonely penthouse, as if those dust motes catching the sunlight had suddenly turned to gold. I'll have the paperwork drawn up, Marla said briskly, already tapping on her tablet. Of course, we'll need to discuss publicity guidelines and… Later, Graham said firmly, his eyes still on Joy's latest sketch. Right now, I'd like to hear more about how Joy sees the world. He sat down on the floor, surprising himself again. Would you show me more of your drawings? The marble lobby gleamed under soft lighting as Elena guided her children toward the exit. Her work uniform felt like a shield against the opulence surrounding them, a reminder of who she was and where she belonged. Joy clutched her sketchbook close to her chest while Noah skipped ahead, his sneakers squeaking against the polished floor. Walk, my Joe, Elena called softly, not wanting to draw attention. The meeting with Graham had gone better than she'd expected, but she was ready to return to their familiar world of cramped apartments and honest work. A broad-shouldered man in a crisp security uniform stepped out from behind the desk, blocking their path to the revolving doors. Excuse me, ma'am, I need to see your visitor's pass. Elena's spine stiffened. We were just upstairs with Mr. Whitlock. We're leaving now. The guard's eyes swept over her cleaning uniform, his expression hardening. Building policy states all guests must be escorted by a resident through the lobby, no exceptions. But we just came from Mr. Whitlock's penthouse, Joy said, her voice small. He liked my drawing. Listen, kid, rules are rules. Without a resident escort, you'll need to wait here while I verify your story. He reached for his radio, and Elena felt her cheeks burn. Noah's lower lip trembled as he pressed against her leg. Mommy? It's okay, baby. Elena squared her shoulders, fighting to keep her voice steady. Sir, I work in this building. I clean offices on the 38th floor. You can check with… Staff entrance is around back, the guard cut in. This lobby is for residents and their approved guests only. Tears welled in Noah's eyes. I want to go home. Elena's hands trembled as she reached for her phone, wondering if she should call her supervisor, but knowing in her heart it wouldn't make a difference. She'd faced this kind of treatment before. The assumptions, the dismissals, the invisible lines drawn between people like her and people like them. What's going on here? Graham's voice rang across the lobby, sharp with authority. The guard straightened. Sir, I was just explaining our visitor policy to these individuals. Graham's footsteps echoed against marble as he strode toward them, his face flushed with anger. These individuals are my personal guests, Thompson. Or didn't Anton inform you? Mr. Anton instructed us to maintain strict security protocols, sir. No exceptions without resident escort. I see. Graham's jaw tightened. He turned to Elena, his expression softening. I'm so sorry about this. Please, let me walk you out. Elena wanted to refuse, to prove she didn't need his help, but Noah's sniffles made her swallow her pride. She nodded once, sharp and quick. Graham crouched down to Noah's level. Hey buddy, want to see something cool? He pulled a shiny quarter from behind Noah's ear, earning a watery smile. There's that happy face. As they walked toward the exit, Graham spoke quietly to Elena. This won't happen again. I promise. Through the revolving doors, they emerged onto the sidewalk where afternoon sunlight warmed the concrete. City noise wrapped around them, car horns, conversation, the familiar rhythm of their neighborhood. Thank you, Elena said stiffly, her dignity still smarting. But you didn't have to. Yes, I did. Graham's voice was firm. What happened in there was wrong. I'm having Anton's supervisor replaced first thing tomorrow. Joy tugged at Elena's sleeve. Can we go to the park, Mommy? Just for a little while? Not today, mi amor. We need to get home. Elena managed a polite smile for Graham. Thank you again for everything. The Arts Center funding, it means a lot. Graham nodded, looking like he wanted to say more. Instead, he just waved as they started down the sidewalk. Elena held her children's hands tightly as they walked away from the gleaming tower. The incident in the lobby had left a familiar ache in her chest, one that no amount of kindness from a billionaire could quite erase. In her mind, she saw the guard's dismissive glance, heard the edge in his voice when he mentioned the staff entrance. Joy chattered about her drawings and Graham's praise, but Elena's thoughts drifted. She wondered how many more invisible barriers stood between their worlds, how many more times she'd have to prove her right to exist in spaces meant for others. The scholarship and Arts Center funding were generous gifts, but they couldn't change the fundamental truth that people like her would always be seen as outsiders in places like that. Noah's small hand squeezed hers. "Mommy, can we have mac and cheese for dinner?" His simple question anchored her back to what mattered: her children, their home, the life they'd built together. "Yes, mijo, we can have mac and cheese." The fancy lobby with its marble floors felt far away now as they walked their familiar route home. Elena straightened her shoulders, reminding herself that their worth wasn't measured by how others saw them. Still, a part of her wondered if the wealthy world, with all its unspoken rules and careful exclusions, would ever truly accept someone like her. Graham led them back to the penthouse, still fuming from the lobby incident. His jaw clenched as he strode across the gleaming hardwood floors to his desk, pulling out his phone to make some calls about the security situation. "I'm so sorry about what happened," he said, running a hand through his silver-streaked hair. "That's not how we treat people here. It won't happen again." Elena stood near the floor-to-ceiling windows, her posture rigid despite her exhaustion. "It's fine, Mr. Whitlock. These things happen." Her voice was steady, but her eyes held the weight of too many similar experiences. Joy wandered over to the small sitting area, her artist's gaze taking in details she hadn't noticed before. Graham's sleeve rode up as he gestured during his phone call, and something caught her attention: a simple braided cord bracelet, worn and faded, wrapped around his wrist. "That's like the one from Mommy's story," Joy exclaimed, pointing at his wrist. Graham paused mid-sentence, glancing down at the bracelet. "I'm sorry, what was that?" Elena's head snapped up, her eyes fixing on the familiar pattern of threads. The color drained from her face as a memory surfaced. A cold winter night 5 years ago, the warmth of the church soup kitchen, and a stranger's kindness when she needed it most. "It's nothing," Elena said quickly, but her voice trembled slightly. "Joy, my amor, we should go." Graham ended his call, his attention now fully on the bracelet he absently touched. "This old thing? I've had it for years. Got it at a church event, actually." Elena's heart thundered in her chest. She remembered that night so clearly, 8 months pregnant with Noah, worried about making rent, and a man with kind eyes had slipped a grocery store gift card under her napkin. He'd worn a bracelet just like that one, but she'd never seen his face clearly in the dim lighting. "The nice man gave Mommy help when Noah was still in her tummy," Joy explained, oblivious to her mother's discomfort. "She tells us that story sometimes, about angels wearing regular clothes." Graham's expression shifted, a flash of recognition crossing his features. "St. Mark's Church? The winter soup kitchen program?" Elena grabbed her purse, needing to leave before the possibility could take root in her mind. "We really should be going. Thank you again for everything, Mr. Whitlock." "Please, call me Graham," he said softly, standing up. "And let me walk you down. I want to make sure there are no more incidents." Noah, who had been unusually quiet, perked up. "Can we come back? I like it here. It's big." "Of course you can," Graham smiled, kneeling to Noah's level. "Maybe next time I'll show you my collection of toy cars." Elena watched their interaction with a complicated mix of emotions. The gentle way Graham spoke to her children, the familiar bracelet, the memory of kindness on a desperate night. It was too much to process. "That would be nice," she managed, though her mind was spinning. They gathered their things, Joy carefully tucking her sketchbook into her backpack. Graham pressed the elevator button, and they waited in a charged silence. "The Arts Center funding will be arranged this week," Graham said, clearly trying to keep things professional. "And I meant what I said about Joy's talent. She has a real gift. The elevator arrived with a soft ding. Elena ushered her children inside, eager to escape the growing weight of unspoken questions. Just as the doors began to close, Noah reached out suddenly, grabbing Graham's sleeve. His small voice carried clearly in the quiet space. "Mommy says you're my daddy." The words hung in the air like suspended glass, ready to shatter. Elena's breath caught in her throat, her eyes widening in shock. Joy gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. Graham stood frozen, his face a mask of confusion and surprise. The elevator doors stuttered, held open by his automatically outstretched arm. "Noah!" Elena found her voice, though it came out strangled. I didn't." The silence stretched, heavy and absolute, broken only by the soft hum of the elevator's mechanics. The penthouse fell into a sudden, deafening silence. Noah's innocent words hung in the air like a thundercloud ready to burst. Elena's face drained of color as she stared at her young son, her mouth opening and closing without sound. I never said that," Elena finally managed to stammer, her voice barely above a whisper. "Noah, honey, why would you say such a thing?" Graham stood frozen, his face a mixture of shock and something softer. Concern, perhaps. His hand unconsciously went to the braided bracelet on his wrist, twisting it in a nervous gesture. Marla Kenner stepped forward from where she'd been hovering near Graham's desk, her heels clicking sharply against the floor. "This is exactly the kind of liability situation we need to avoid," she hissed, already pulling out her phone. "We'll need statements, documentation." "Stop." Graham's voice was quiet, but firm. He knelt down to Noah's level, keeping his movements slow and gentle. "Noah, buddy, I think there's been a misunderstanding." But Elena was already moving, gathering her children close. "We need to go, now." Her cheeks burned with embarrassment as she grabbed their coats. Joy tried to stuff her sketchbook into her backpack, her small hands trembling. "Elena, wait," Graham called out, rising to his feet. "We should talk about this." "There's nothing to talk about," Elena said sharply, her protective instincts in full force. "It's just a child's confusion. I'm so sorry for any inconvenience." The last word tasted bitter in her mouth. Marla stepped between them, her professional smile not reaching her eyes. "Perhaps it's best if we all take some time to process this. I'll have legal draw up some paperwork." "No paperwork," Elena cut her off. "No statements, no nothing." She hustled her children toward the elevator, Noah's small face crumpled in confusion. "Mommy, did I do something bad?" he whispered, as the elevator doors closed. Elena's heart shattered at his worried tone. "No, mi amor. You didn't do anything wrong." The ride home was silent, except for Joy's occasional sniffles. Elena's mind raced, trying to piece together where Noah could have gotten such an idea. The braided bracelet kept floating back into her thoughts. That night at the soup kitchen, years ago, when a kind stranger had helped her. But it couldn't be. It was just a coincidence. Their small apartment felt especially cramped that evening. Elena moved through their nighttime routine mechanically, dinner, baths, pajamas, while her children watched her with worried eyes. Finally, as she tucked Joy into bed, the tears came. "Mama," Joy whispered, clutching her worn, stuffed rabbit. "The other kids at school, they've been saying things to Noah." Elena sat heavily on the edge of the bed. "What things, mija?" "About not having a daddy," they said. Joy hiccuped through her tears. "They said rich people sometimes have secret families. Noah heard them talking about Mr. Whitlock's picture in the magazine, and they said maybe—" "Oh, Joy." Elena gathered her daughter close, rocking her gently. "People say cruel things sometimes, but we know who we are. We're strong together, just us." From his small bed across the room, Noah's voice piped up. "I just wanted it to be true, Mama. He's nice." He smiled at my cars. Elena closed her eyes against fresh tears. "Come here, pequeño." Noah scrambled over, and she held both her children tight. "Listen to me. Both of you. We don't need anyone else. God gave me the two most perfect children in the world, and that's all that matters." It took longer than usual to settle them both to sleep. Joy kept wiping her eyes on her sleeve, and Noah needed extra stories and hugs. Finally, Their breathing evened out into the peaceful rhythm of sleep. Elena knelt beside their beds in the dim glow of the nightlight. "Dear God," she whispered, her hands clasped tight. "Protect my babies. Give me the strength to keep them safe." She looked at their innocent faces, so vulnerable in sleep. "Even if it means staying away from kind men with sad eyes and familiar bracelets, even if it means giving up opportunities. They're all I have, Lord, all I need." She brushed a gentle kiss on each forehead, breathing in the sweet scent of their shampoo. Noah had kicked off his blanket again. She tucked it carefully around his shoulders. Joy's sketchbook had fallen to the floor, open to a fresh drawing. Graham kneeling to look at Noah's toy cars, his smile gentle and real. Elena's throat tightened. She closed the sketchbook softly and set it on Joy's bedside table. Tomorrow she would have to figure out how to handle this mess. How to protect her children from gossip and false hopes. How to face going back to work in that building. But for now, she simply watched her children sleep, their faces peaceful despite the turmoil of the evening. In the quiet darkness, she renewed her silent vow to be both mother and father, to shield them from harm, to keep their hearts safe. Even if that meant turning away from the first person who had made her feel seen in years. The morning sun filtered through Elena's worn curtains, casting warm patches on the faded linoleum floor. She had barely slept, spending most of the night alternating between comforting Joy and trying to make sense of yesterday's disaster. Noah, thankfully, seemed to have forgotten his shocking announcement, playing with his cereal as if nothing had happened. A gentle knock at the door made Elena freeze. Joy looked up from her untouched toast, eyes wide and hopeful. Elena smoothed her work uniform and checked through the peephole, her breath catching when she saw Graham Whitlock standing there, holding a modest bouquet of yellow daisies. "Just a minute," Elena called out, her voice steadier than she felt. She turned to her children. "Joy, honey, take Noah to your room for a bit." "But, Mama, please, Mia." Once the children were out of sight, Elena opened the door. Graham stood there in a simple sweater and jeans, a far cry from yesterday's business suit. The flowers trembled slightly in his hand. "These are for Joy," he said softly. "And I came to apologize. May I come in?" Elena hesitated, then stepped aside. Graham entered, his tall frame making the small apartment seem even tinier. He glanced around, taking in the carefully mended curtains, the stack of library books, the children's artwork taped to the walls. "You have a lovely home," he said sincerely. "It's small, but it's ours." Elena crossed her arms. "Mr. Whitlock, Graham, please, Graham." She took a deep breath. "About yesterday." "That's why I'm here." He set the flowers on the kitchen counter. "I want you to know that I've already spoken to my PR team. No one will be pressuring you or the children. This stays private." Relief loosened some of the tension in Elena's shoulders. "Thank you." Graham ran a hand through his hair, a surprisingly human gesture for someone who appeared so polished in magazines. "But there's something else we need to discuss. The timing of." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "Noah's birth, and that church kitchen you mentioned." Elena's cheeks warmed. "I wasn't going to bring that up, but we should. For everyone's peace of mind." Graham's voice remained gentle. "I'd like to propose something. A private DNA test." Elena stiffened. "I never asked for—" "I know," Graham cut in quickly. "And I believe you when you say you never told Noah anything like that. But rumors have a way of growing. If we handle this now, quietly and professionally, we can protect both our families from speculation." Elena sank into one of her kitchen chairs, suddenly tired. "And if I say no?" Graham sat across from her, maintaining a respectful distance. "Then we respect that. But Elena," he leaned forward slightly, "don't you want to know? Not for money or headlines, but just to have an answer?" A small noise from the hallway made them both turn. Joy stood there, Noah peeking around her legs. "Are those flowers for me?" Joy asked in a small voice. Graham's face softened. "They are. Yellow for sunshine, just like your art brings." Joy crept forward, touching the daisies with gentle fingers. Noah followed, climbing into Elena's lap without hesitation. "Mama?" Joy looked between the adults. Are you still mad about yesterday? Elena hugged Noah closer. No, baby. Mr. Graham and I are just talking about grown-up things. Important things, Graham added, about making sure everyone feels safe and respected. Elena studied him over her son's curls. His sincerity seemed genuine, and the practical part of her mind acknowledged the sense in his suggestion. A clear answer would be better than lingering doubts. If, she emphasized the word, if we did this test, it would be completely confidential? No media? No lawyers? Absolutely. Graham's relief was visible. I know a private clinic. They're incredibly discreet. We could have results in a few days. Elena nodded slowly. All right. But I have conditions. Name them. This stays between us. No PR team, no board members. And regardless of the results, nothing changes for my children. They don't need their lives turned upside down. Graham held her gaze. You have my word. Joy, who had been arranging the daisies in an old mason jar, turned to them. Does this mean we can still do the art project? The one about drawing people who build things? Graham glanced at Elena, waiting for her lead. She managed a small smile. Yes, Mija, if you still want to. Good, Joy said firmly, in that decisive way children sometimes have. Because Mr. Graham still looks lonely sometimes. Graham's startled laugh broke the remaining tension. He stood, adjusting the braided bracelet on his wrist, a gesture Elena was beginning to recognize as a nervous habit. I'll have my assistant send over the clinic details. We can schedule something this week? Elena nodded, walking him to the door. As she watched him disappear down the hallway, the bracelet catching the morning light, she leaned against the doorframe and closed her eyes. What had she just agreed to? Her carefully ordered life, work, children, church, repeat, suddenly felt like a Jenga tower with someone pulling out the bottom pieces. She didn't know if she was making the right choice, but she did know one thing. There was no going back to yesterday's simplicity. Inside, she could hear Joy explaining to Noah how to properly arrange daisies. Normal, everyday sounds. But now they carried the weight of questions. She wasn't sure she was ready to answer. Morning light streamed through the tall windows of Graham's penthouse office, where he had gathered a small group to announce his newest project. Elena sat straight-backed on a leather armchair, while Joy perched beside her, clutching her sketchbook. Lavi had insisted on coming along for moral support, though Elena suspected she was just curious about the wealthy man who had captured Joy's artistic attention. I want to showcase the people who make this city work, Graham explained, his usual corporate polish softening as he spoke. The ones we pass every day but don't really see. And I'd like Joy to help me do that, if she's willing. Joy's eyes lit up, but she looked to Elena first. Elena gave a small nod, and Joy broke into a smile. Our first subject is someone very special to me, Graham continued. He pressed a button on his desk phone. Sarah, could you send Mr. Henderson up? Minutes later, an elderly man in a gray custodial uniform entered the office. His weathered face creased into a warm smile when he saw Graham. Billy Henderson, the man introduced himself, extending a calloused hand to Joy. I've been keeping this building clean for 35 years. Graham's expression softened. Mr. Henderson was here long before I owned this building. When I was 12, I used to help him mop floors to earn extra money. This one? Mr. Henderson chuckled, gesturing at Graham. Skinniest kid you ever saw, but he worked harder than grown men. Used to share my sandwich with him. Lavi, who had been quietly arranging coffee and pastries on a side table, perked up. Now that sounds like a story worth hearing. Joy opened her sketchbook, pencil ready. Mr. Henderson settled into a chair, his uniform crisp despite the morning's work. Mind if I take my coffee black, ma'am? He asked Lavi. Coming right up, she replied, already pouring. And there's fresh banana bread too, my grandmother's recipe. As Lavi distributed coffee and snacks, Mr. Henderson began to talk. He spoke of arriving in the city decades ago with nothing but hope and a strong back. Of learning every corner of the building, from basement to roof. Of noticing a thin boy hanging around after school, looking hungry. Couldn't just leave him be, Miss Henderson said, accepting a second piece of banana bread from Lavi. Taught him how to clean properly, gave him odd jobs. He had good hands and a quick mind. Joy's pencil moved steadily across the paper, capturing not just Mr. Henderson's features, but the dignity in his posture, the kindness in his eyes. Elena watched her daughter work, amazed at how she could see beneath the surface to the heart of a person. Graham sat quietly, his usual executive demeanor replaced by something more vulnerable. "Mr. Henderson gave me my first real job," he said softly. "He treated me like I mattered, when most people just saw a poor kid making trouble." "You did matter," Mr. Henderson replied firmly. "Still do, though these days you're a bit too fancy to help me mop floors." The room filled with warm laughter, and Elena noticed how the morning sun caught the silver in Mr. Henderson's hair, the proud set of his shoulders. Joy captured it all, her pencil dancing across the paper. Lavi topped off coffee cups and shared stories of her own early days as a nurse, when she'd learned that every person who walked through hospital doors had a story worth knowing. The conversation flowed easily, crossing the invisible lines of class and status that usually divided their worlds. After an hour, Joy held up her sketchbook. The portrait showed Mr. Henderson in his uniform, but she'd drawn him like a king, dignity radiating from every line. In the background, she'd added subtle details: a young boy with a mop, a shared sandwich, the city skyline rising behind him. Graham's breath caught as he studied the drawing. Mr. Henderson wiped his eyes quickly with his sleeve. "Well, if that don't beat all," the older man said gruffly. "You've made me look like somebody." "You are somebody," Joy said quietly. "You helped build him." She pointed at Graham. "And he built all this." Graham stood and walked to the window, gazing out at the city he now owned a piece of. But for the first time, he seemed to see it differently, not as a collection of properties and investments, but as a web of connected lives. People like Mr. Henderson, who had given a hungry boy more than just a job, but a chance to believe in himself. He turned back to the room, to this unlikely gathering: a custodian, a cleaning woman and her artistic daughter, a retired nurse, and himself. In Joy's vision, they all belonged together, all part of the same story. "Thank you," he said, and everyone knew he meant more than just the drawing. Mr. Henderson stood and straightened his uniform. "Better get back to work," he said. "These floors won't clean themselves." But before he left, he squeezed Graham's shoulder, the gesture bridging decades. Joy carefully removed the portrait from her sketchbook and handed it to Graham. He held it like something precious, seeing himself and his city through new eyes. The evening air held the first hint of spring as Graham and Elena walked along the quiet city streets. They had just finished another drawing session where Joy sketched Marcus, the building's maintenance supervisor. The little girl was now safely at home with Lavi, who had shooed them both out with a knowing smile, insisting she could watch the children for an hour. Graham walked with his hands in his pockets, his suit jacket open and tie loosened. Even dressed down, he carried himself with the bearing of someone used to boardrooms and business deals. But there was something different about him tonight, a softness around his eyes, a slight slouch to his shoulders that made him seem more human. Joy really captured Marcus's kindness, Elena said, breaking the comfortable silence. The way she drew his hands, worn but gentle. Graham nodded, a small smile playing at his lips. She sees people, really sees them. He paused at a crosswalk, waiting for the light. Marcus was one of the few who saw me too, back when I was just a scholarship kid trying to make it through business school. Elena glanced at him, surprised. "You knew him then?" "I worked as a janitor to help pay tuition." Graham's voice grew distant with memory. "Marcus was my supervisor. He'd find me studying in empty classrooms at night and leave me coffee. Never made me feel." He trailed off, searching for words. "Like you didn't belong?" Elena finished softly. "Exactly." Graham's shoulders tensed slightly. "The other students, they could smell it on me, that I wasn't born to their world. Wrong clothes, wrong accent, wrong everything. I'd walk into those marble hallways wearing the nicest suit I could afford and still feel like an imposter." They turned down a quieter street lined with old brownstones. Elena hugged her arms against the evening chill, and without a word, Graham shrugged off his jacket and draped it over her shoulders. "Thank you," she said, pulling it close. I understand that feeling, the wrong everything. Even now, cleaning the offices at night, I hear the whispers, see the looks. That cleaning lady, like I'm invisible. Or when I'm with my kids at the park in the nice neighborhood, other mothers pulling their children away. Graham's jaw tightened. I'm sorry. That's not right. It's life, Elena said with a small shrug, but her eyes held old hurt. I just want my children to have it easier. Joy's so sensitive, she notices everything. And Noah. She took a deep breath. I work 3 jobs so they can live in a good school district, so they can dream big. You're giving them wings, Graham said quietly. Elena smiled, a real smile that reached her eyes. That's what my mama used to say. Before she passed, she told me, Elena, mi amor, your job is to give them strong wings and teach them to fly. They walked in silence for a moment, their footsteps echoing on the empty sidewalk. A car passed, its headlights casting their shadows long against the brick buildings. Sometimes, Graham said slowly, I look at all I've built, all the zeros in my bank account, and wonder if I'm still that scared kid in the borrowed suit, trying to prove something. And are you? Elena asked. Graham considered this. Less, maybe, when I'm around Joy. And you. He said it simply, without pretense. Elena felt warmth bloom in her chest that had nothing to do with his jacket. They reached her apartment building, a modest but well-kept walk-up. The streetlight cast a gentle glow on the worn stoop where they stood. This is me, Elena said softly, making no move to climb the steps. Graham nodded, his hands back in his pockets. Thank you for walking with me, and listening. Thank you for understanding, Elena replied. They stood there, neither quite ready to break the moment, as a gentle breeze rustled the emerging spring leaves above them. The marble-floored conference room gleamed under soft recessed lighting as the condo board members gathered around the long mahogany table. Anton Barrow sat at the head, his silver-streaked hair perfectly coiffed, his demeanor radiating polished authority. Graham took his usual seat, noting how Anton's lips tightened almost imperceptibly when their eyes met. Item 4 on today's agenda, Anton announced, shuffling papers with manicured hands. Concerns building security and amenity access. He paused, scanning the room with practiced precision. Recent events have highlighted the need for more discriminating policies regarding non-resident access to premium areas. Graham's jaw clenched. He knew exactly where this was heading. I propose, Anton continued smoothly, that we implement stricter guidelines. Staff members and their families would require explicit resident escort for any amenity floor access. This includes the pool, gym, and social rooms. He smiled thinly. Purely as a security measure, you understand? Several board members nodded, murmuring agreement. Mrs. Davidson from the 8th floor clutched her pearls and whispered something about maintaining standards. Graham leaned forward, his voice cutting through the whispers. And what security incidents, exactly, have prompted this sudden concern? Anton's smile didn't waver. It's preventative, Graham. Surely you understand the need to protect our residents' interests. Their interests? Graham's laugh held no humor. Or their prejudices? The room grew still. Mrs. Davidson's pearls stopped clicking. I fail to see, Graham continued, standing slowly, how a talented young artist and her brother using the social room under my invitation poses any security risk. Unless there's something specific about Elena Cruz's family that concerns you? Anton's facade cracked slightly. This isn't about any particular individual, isn't it? Graham pulled out his phone, tapping quickly. Because I have the security logs right here. 0 incidents involving staff families in the past 5 years. What I do see are multiple commendations for Elena Cruz's professionalism and reliability. He turned to address the whole board. The people who maintain this building, who keep it running smoothly, they're not just staff, they're part of our community. If we start treating them like second-class citizens, what does that say about us? This is about maintaining appropriate boundaries, Anton insisted, his smooth voice taking on an edge. The amenity floors are a premium feature, which I helped fund, Graham cut in. And I say they're for building residents and the people who make this place home for all of us." Down the hall, Elena was finishing her afternoon rounds, unaware of the meeting that would affect her family. She was checking the supply closet when Graham's voice carried through the partly open conference room door. Her hands stilled on the cleaning cart as she listened, heart pounding. "I move to reject this proposal," Graham was saying firmly. "And I suggest we instead discuss implementing anti-discrimination training for all board members and security staff." Elena's eyes burned with unexpected tears. No one had ever stood up for her like this before. Yet shame colored her cheeks at being the cause of such tension. The board meeting ended in frustrated murmurs. Elena quickly pushed her cart around the corner, but not before Anton emerged, his face tight with barely controlled anger. Graham followed, spotting her immediately. "Elena," he called softly, ignoring Anton's obvious displeasure. "Let me walk you out." She wanted to refuse, to say she didn't need his protection. But the warmth in his eyes made her nod instead. "You didn't have to do that," she said quietly as they walked toward the service elevator. "I don't want to cause problems." "You're not the one causing problems," Graham replied, his voice gentle but firm. "And yes, I did have to do that. It's long past time someone did." Elena's throat tightened. "The children and I can use the regular entrance. We don't need—" "Elena." Graham stopped walking, turning to face her. "You and your children deserve to walk through any door in this building with your heads held high. Don't let anyone make you feel otherwise." She met his gaze, seeing not pity but genuine respect. It made her stand a little straighter. Anton watched from the conference room doorway as Graham escorted Elena to the elevator, his presence a silent promise of protection. The board chairman's expression darkened, his fingers drumming against his leather portfolio. Elena stepped into the elevator, her dignity intact, but her heart heavy with worry about the waves her presence was creating in Graham's world. As the doors closed, she caught a final glimpse of Graham's reassuring smile, a beacon of kindness in a world that often felt too cold. The setting sun painted long shadows across the polished wooden floors of the Arts Center gallery. Joy's giggles echoed off the high ceilings as she and Noah darted between patches of golden light streaming through the tall windows. Their footsteps made soft padding sounds against the floor, a playful rhythm that filled the quiet space. "Look, Noah, your shadow's getting bigger," Joy called out, pointing to where her little brother's silhouette stretched across the wall. Noah squealed with delight, jumping up and down to make his shadow dance. Elena watched from near the doorway, her cleaning cart tucked discreetly against the wall. She'd finished her shift early, but instead of rushing home, she'd lingered, wanting to give her children a few more precious moments in this beautiful space. Joy's drawings lined the walls, simple yet powerful sketches of the city's everyday heroes. The janitor with kind eyes, the delivery woman with her determined smile, the nurse whose gentle hands had once tended Graham's scraped knees when he was small. Graham stood beside Elena, his usual pristine suit jacket draped over a nearby chair, his tie loosened. In the fading light, he looked softer somehow, more approachable than the stern businessman from magazine covers. He watched the children play with a gentle smile that made the corners of his eyes crinkle. "They bring the place to life, don't they?" he said softly, turning to Elena. "I can't remember the last time these halls heard children laughing." Elena nodded, smoothing her uniform skirt self-consciously. "They have a gift for that, finding joy in simple things." From somewhere in the building, faint music drifted through the halls, probably the evening cleaning crew's radio. The melody was slow and sweet, an old love song that made Elena think of summer evenings and front porch swings. Graham turned to her, extending his hand with a slight bow. "May I?" Elena hesitated, her eyes darting to her uniform, then to her children. "I'm not exactly dressed for dancing. You're perfect exactly as you are," Graham said simply, his hand still offered, patient and steady. Something in his voice, in the honest warmth of his eyes, made Elena's doubts fade. She placed her hand in his, letting him draw her into the center of the room. His other hand settled respectfully at her waist, and they began to sway to the distant music. Joy and Noah paused their game to watch, Noah's mouth forming a perfect O of surprise. Joy's eyes sparkled as she pulled out her ever-present sketchbook, her pencil moving quickly across the page. "I don't know what this is," Elena murmured, looking up at Graham as they turned slowly in the golden light. What we're doing here. Graham's hand tightened slightly on hers, warm and reassuring. I don't either, he admitted. But it feels good. Real. Like maybe we don't need to name it just yet. They moved together in comfortable silence, their shadows merging and separating on the wooden floor. Elena found herself relaxing into the moment, allowing herself to feel the simple pleasure of being held, of moving to music with someone who looked at her like she was something precious. Mommy's dancing, Noah Stage whispered to Joy, his face lit with delight. Like a princess, Joy smiled, adding careful strokes to her drawing. She looks happy, she whispered back. The music faded, but Graham and Elena continued their slow dance for a few more moments, neither quite ready to break the spell. When they finally stopped, he kept hold of her hand for a heartbeat longer than necessary. Thank you, he said softly. And Elena knew he meant for more than just the dance. We should get home, Elena said, though her voice held reluctance. It's getting late, and these two have school tomorrow. Graham nodded, helping her gather her things, while Joy carefully tucked her sketchbook away. Noah yawned, rubbing his eyes with tiny fists, the evening's excitement catching up with him. At the gallery entrance, Graham held the door for them, his hand brushing Elena's shoulder briefly as she passed. Get home safe, he said quietly. Outside, the evening air was cool and sweet. Elena held her children's hands as they walked to the bus stop, their shadows long behind them in the sunset. Noah skipped every few steps, humming fragments of the song they'd danced to. Joy walked quietly, but her smile said everything. Elena pulled them both a little closer as they waited for the bus, breathing in the scent of Noah's baby shampoo and the graphite smell that always clung to Joy's fingers. Her heart felt full, warm with a feeling she wasn't quite ready to name. The memory of Graham's hand in hers lingered like a promise, and she found herself smiling softly into the gathering dusk. Late afternoon, sunlight filtered through the stained glass windows of the church, casting colorful patterns across the worn wooden pews. Elena sat in the front row, her work uniform still on, hands clasped tightly in her lap. Pastor Miller settled beside her, his presence calm and steady, like always. I keep thinking about what the test might say, Elena confessed, her voice barely above a whisper. Part of me hopes it's negative, just to end all this confusion. But another part. She trailed off, unable to finish. Pastor Miller nodded thoughtfully. Elena, may I share something with you? When she nodded, he continued. You know my Sarah and I adopted our 3 children. People used to ask me if I loved them, the same as if they were really mine. He shook his head, smiling. But love isn't about blood. It's about choice. Every morning, we choose who to welcome into our hearts. Elena dabbed at her eyes with her sleeve. But what if the test, whatever that paper says, Pastor Miller interrupted gently, it won't change who you are to your children, or who Graham is becoming to all of you. Love is a decision we make with our actions, Elena. It's showing up. It's staying when things get hard. They bowed their heads together, and Pastor Miller's deep voice filled the quiet church. Lord, give Elena peace as she waits. Help her remember that. You make families in all sorts of ways. Guide Graham's heart too. And Lord, whatever the test reveals, help them all choose love. The kind that builds up, the kind that stays. Across town, in his penthouse office, Graham sealed the DNA swabs into their protective envelope. His hands trembled slightly as he wrote the laboratory address. The bracelet on his wrist caught the light, reminding him of that long-ago night in the church kitchen. He hadn't known Elena then, hadn't known her story, but something about her quiet dignity had touched him, made him slip that grocery card under her napkin. Now, years later, he found himself hoping. But for what? If he wasn't Noah's father, would it change how his heart lifted when the boy grinned? If he was, could he ever be worthy of the trust Elena placed in him by agreeing to this test? He called his courier service, arranging for immediate pickup. As he waited, he wandered down to the art center where Joy worked on her latest drawing. She sat cross-legged on the floor, her sketchbook propped against her knees. This piece was different, larger, more ambitious. May I see? Graham asked softly, Not wanting to startle her, Joy nodded, tilting the page. Graham's breath caught. She had drawn him, but not alone this time. Around him stood all the people from her previous sketches, the janitor who'd once shown him kindness, the nurse who'd bandaged his childhood scrapes, the delivery woman who always had a smile. Their hands rested on his shoulders, their faces warm and welcoming. In the drawing, he wasn't the lonely man from the magazine cover anymore. He belonged. "It's called My People," Joy explained, adding careful shading to a corner. "Because that's what you called them, remember? When we started drawing everyone?" Graham knelt beside her, his throat tight. "I remember. Mommy says sometimes family is who you choose," Joy continued, her pencil moving steadily. "Like how Pastor Miller chose his kids, and how Miss Lavey chose all of us to be her grandchildren, even though we're not really related." In her apartment that evening, Elena watched Joy put the finishing touches on her drawing. The skill in those young hands amazed her. Not just the technical ability, but the way Joy saw into people's hearts and put that truth on paper. "It's getting late, sweetheart," Elena said softly. "Time to put the sketchbook away." Joy carefully closed her book, hugging it to her chest before placing it in its special drawer. Elena's heart pounded as she thought about the DNA test, about Graham's gentle eyes, about Pastor Miller's words on choosing love. Fear and hope danced in her chest, impossible to separate. "Mommy?" Joy asked as Elena tucked the sketchbook away. "Do you think Mr. Graham will like my drawing?" Elena pulled her daughter close, breathing in the familiar scent of pencil shavings and strawberry shampoo. "I think," she said carefully, "he'll understand exactly what you're trying to say." The spring gala transformed the Community Arts Center into a glittering wonderland. Twinkling lights draped from the ceiling like falling stars, casting a warm glow over Joy's drawings that lined the pristine white walls. The usual scent of art supplies and coffee had been replaced by the delicate fragrance of fresh flowers arranged in elegant crystal vases. Elena smoothed down her borrowed navy dress, a gift from Lavey, who insisted she couldn't wear her everyday clothes tonight. Joy stood close to her mother, fidgeting with the ribbon in her hair, while Noah tugged at his clip-on tie. They looked like a picture from a magazine, even if Elena's hands still bore the slight roughness from years of hard work. "You look beautiful, all of you," Graham said softly, appearing beside them in his perfectly tailored suit, his eyes crinkled with genuine warmth as he smiled at the family. "Are you ready, Joy?" Joy nodded, though she gripped Elena's hand tighter. The gallery was filling with important people. Wealthy donors in expensive clothes, local news reporters with cameras, art critics scribbling in notebooks. Elena squeezed her daughter's hand back, providing silent support. "Ladies and gentlemen," Graham's voice carried across the room as he stepped to the center. The quiet chatter ceased immediately. "Thank you all for coming tonight. We're here to celebrate something extraordinary, not just art, but the power of truly seeing one another." He gestured to the walls where Joy's portraits hung in simple black frames. There was Marcus the janitor, his kind eyes crinkling at the corners as he leaned on his mop. Maria the lunch lady, her hands busy kneading bread dough, joy radiating from her face. Tom the security guard, standing tall and proud in his uniform. "These are the people who build our city," Graham continued. "They're our neighbors, our helpers, our friends. And it took the clear eyes of a remarkable young artist to help us all see them properly." Joy pressed closer to Elena as Graham beckoned them forward. Elena's heart hammered, but she held her head high as they joined Graham in front of the crowd. "I want to thank someone very special," Graham said, his voice softening. "Elena Cruz, who raised a world changer, who taught her daughter to look past surfaces and see into hearts, who shows us daily what grace and dignity look like." Elena felt tears prick at her eyes, as scattered applause grew into sustained clapping. She saw Lavey in the crowd, beaming proudly. Pastor Miller stood nearby, nodding in approval. The evening flowed like a dream after that. Donors crowded around Joy's drawings, praising her talent and vision. Noah charmed everyone with his gap-toothed smile as he explained which pictures were his favorites. Elena found herself drawn into conversations about art and community, her usual shyness forgotten in the magic of the moment. Graham stayed close by, his presence warm and steady, When an elderly patron asked if Joy would consider expanding her series to other neighborhoods, Graham's hand found Elena's elbow, steadying her as he announced matching funds for 3 new locations. "Look at them," Lavie whispered to Pastor Miller, watching Graham laugh at something Noah said while Joy showed Elena her favorite drawing. "They fit together like puzzle pieces, don't they?" The highlight came when Joy unveiled her newest piece, a large portrait of Graham himself, but not alone or austere like the magazine cover that started it all. In Joy's drawing, he sat on a park bench, surrounded by all the people she'd sketched over the past weeks. His smile was real, his posture relaxed, his eyes alive with connection. Graham stood silent before it for a long moment. When he turned back to the crowd, his voice was thick with emotion. "This is what community looks like," he said simply. "This is what matters." As the evening drew to a close, a photographer from the local paper approached. "Could we get a picture of the artist with her family and Mr. Whitlock?" Elena started to step back, but Graham's hand found the small of her back, keeping her close. Joy and Noah crowded in front of them, their faces glowing with happiness. For one perfect moment, as camera flashes sparkled like the overhead lights, they weren't the cleaning lady and the billionaire, the struggling single mom and the lonely tycoon. They were just a family, bound by something deeper than circumstance. The photographer checked his screen and smiled. "Beautiful," he said. "Just beautiful." Elena looked up at Graham, found him already watching her with soft eyes. Noah leaned back against her legs, while Joy tucked herself under Graham's arm, her sketchbook clutched to her chest. The moment felt as delicate as a soap bubble, shimmering with possibility. More cameras flashed, capturing their tableau. Elena knew tomorrow there would be practicalities to face, complications to untangle. But for now, in this glittering room full of Joy's art and Graham's generosity, surrounded by the warmth of community and the love of her children, Elena let herself believe in magic. The morning sun filtered through Elena's kitchen window, casting warm patches on the worn linoleum floor. Her hands trembled as she held the official-looking envelope that had just arrived. Inside was the answer to a question that had turned their lives upside down. Graham sat across from her at the small table, his usual polished appearance slightly rumpled, as if he'd been up all night. Neither had touched the coffee growing cold between them. "We should open it," Elena said softly, her voice barely above a whisper. Joy and Noah were still asleep in their room, blissfully unaware of the weight this moment carried. Graham nodded, his fingers drumming nervously on the table. "Together?" Elena carefully tore the envelope, pulling out the crisp white paper inside. Her eyes scanned the medical terminology until they landed on the conclusion. The breath she'd been holding escaped in a long exhale. "Not a match," she said. The words hung in the air between them. Graham's shoulders sagged. With relief? Disappointment? Elena couldn't tell. Her own emotions swirled in a confusing mix. Of course, she had known Graham wasn't Noah's father. But something about seeing it in black and white made her chest ache in an unexpected way. "I should be relieved," Elena admitted, folding the paper with careful precision. "This is what we wanted to know." "Is it?" Graham's voice was gentle, questioning. Before Elena could answer, her phone buzzed, then Graham's. Then both their phones erupted in a cascade of notifications. Graham's face went pale as he stared at his screen. "Elena," he started, but she was already watching the video someone had sent her. There it was, Noah at the playground, talking to someone off camera. Then a cut to him, whispering to Graham in the penthouse. But something was wrong. The audio had been altered, spliced together with other clips. It made it sound like Elena had coached Noah, had planned the whole thing as a scheme to get money from Graham. "This isn't. I never." Elena's hands shook so badly she dropped her phone. Graham was already on his feet, pacing. "Marla's calling. The board members too. This is spreading fast." Elena's phone kept buzzing. Messages from co-workers, other parents at Noah's school, numbers she didn't recognize. She turned it off, feeling sick. "I'll fix this," Graham promised, but his voice had taken on that distant tone she recognized from his TV interviews. "My PR team will handle it." "Your PR team?" Elena stood up slowly. "The same ones who've been warning you about being seen with us?" Graham wouldn't meet her eyes. They're professionals. They know how to manage these situations. Manage? The word tasted bitter. Like we're some problem to be managed? A small noise made them both turn. Joy stood in the doorway, still in her pajamas, clutching her sketchbook. Her dark eyes were wide with understanding beyond her years. "Joy, honey." Elena started, but her daughter backed away. Graham's phone rang again, the special ringtone he used for important business calls. He glanced at it, then at Elena, torn. "You should take it," Elena said quietly. "Your reputation is at stake." "Elena, please?" "Mr. Whitlock?" It was Joy's small voice. She never called him that anymore. "Are you going to pretend you don't know us now?" Graham looked stricken. "No, of course not. I just need to handle this carefully." "Carefully," Elena repeated. She could already imagine the PR statement. Graham Whitlock regrets any confusion, distancing himself from unfounded claims, focusing on his charitable work with properly vetted organizations. Noah appeared behind his sister, rubbing his eyes. "Why is everyone mad?" Elena gathered her children close, her spine straightening with the familiar steel of maternal protection. "We're not mad, mi amor, but we need to stay away from Mr. Whitlock for a while." "The drawings?" Joy's voice cracked. "No more drawings for now, cariño." Graham took a step toward them, but Elena shook her head. Outside, she could hear cars pulling up, probably news vans. Her phone had been filling with messages from reporters before she turned it off. "Elena," Graham pleaded. Let you what? Choose between us and your image? I won't put you in that position." She managed a sad smile. "And I won't put my children through it either." Joy walked to her little art corner by the window. The morning sun caught her face, showing the tears she was trying to hide. With deliberate care, she closed her sketchbook, the one Graham had given her, leather-bound and beautiful. She placed it on the shelf, turned away from the light. "Joy," Graham said softly, but the little girl wouldn't look at him. Noah, not fully understanding but sensing the heavy atmosphere, pressed against Elena's side. "Can we still have pizza on Tuesdays?" Elena stroked his hair, her heart breaking. "Not for a while, Missiello." Graham's phone rang again, insistent. The sound of voices outside grew louder, reporters gathering, probably. Elena could imagine tomorrow's headlines. "You should go," she told Graham. "Use the back stairs. Your PR team will want to get ahead of this." "I don't want," he started, but she cut him off. What we want stopped mattering the moment that video went viral. Elena's voice was firm, despite the tremor in her hands. "Please, Graham, just go." He looked at each of them. Elena standing tall despite her fear. Noah confused, but trusting, and Joy with her closed sketchbook and turned back. Something in his face crumpled, but his phone kept ringing. The world outside kept pressing in, and the gap between their two worlds suddenly seemed as wide as ever. Graham backed toward the door, his normally confident posture bent with indecision. "I'll make this right," he promised. But Elena just shook her head, gathering her children closer as the man who'd briefly made them believe in fairy tales slipped away into the growing morning chaos. Joy's sketchbook sat closed on the shelf, catching the last ray of sunlight before a cloud passed over, leaving the little apartment in shadow. A week had passed since the scandal broke, but to Elena, it felt like years. Her feet dragged as she climbed the stairs to her apartment, her cleaning uniform still damp with sweat from her shift. The hallway lights flickered, casting uncertain shadows on the walls she'd called home for 5 years. Something white caught her eye, a paper taped to her door. Her heart skipped as she drew closer, recognizing the official letterhead. With trembling fingers, she pulled the notice free. Notice of termination of tenancy. The words blurred as tears filled her eyes. 30 days. The landlord cited recent events and community concerns as reasons for ending her lease. They'd survived so much in this little apartment. Noah's first steps, Joy's earliest drawings, countless late nights of Elena working at the kitchen table. Now, it would all be gone. Elena's legs gave out. She slid down the wall, clutching the paper to her chest. A sob escaped her throat, echoing in the empty hallway. "Mama?" Joy's voice came from inside the apartment. Is that you? Elena quickly wiped her eyes and stood up. Yes, mi amor. Just getting the mail. She unlocked the door, trying to hide the notice behind her back, but Joy was too observant. Her dark eyes caught the movement, the tremor in her mother's hands. What's wrong? Elena couldn't lie to her daughter. Not now. She showed Joy the notice, explaining in gentle terms what it meant. Joy's face crumpled. Without a word, she turned and ran to her room, slamming the door. The sound of her sketchbook hitting the wall made Elena flinch. We need to see Lavi, Elena whispered to herself. She'll know what to do. 20 minutes later, they stood at Lavi's door. The elderly woman took one look at Elena's face and pulled her inside, already putting on the kettle for tea. Noah trailed behind them, clutching his favorite toy car. They're making us leave, Elena choked out, finally letting the tears fall freely. After everything, the DNA test proving we didn't want his money, they're still punishing us. Lavi's kitchen was warm and familiar, smelling of cinnamon and fresh bread. Joy sat silently at the table, her usually busy hands still in her lap. She hadn't touched a pencil since the scandal broke. Child, you listen to me, Lavi said, setting a steaming mug in front of Elena. This isn't punishment from God. This is fear from small-minded people. But where will we go? Elena's voice cracked. Who'll rent to us, now that everyone thinks? She couldn't finish the sentence. Lavi's eyes flashed with something fierce. You've got family here. We'll figure it out. Through the kitchen window, they could see Graham's building rising against the sky. Up in his penthouse, Graham stood at his own window, a solitary figure in an empty room. The same view Joy had captured in her first drawing. The loneliest man in the city, now more alone than ever. His PR team had insisted on distance, protected him from the fallout while Elena's world crumbled. The art program was suspended, the scholarship funds frozen pending review, all their careful dreams scattered like autumn leaves. He's hurting too, Joy whispered, following her mother's gaze. Look how he stands. Elena turned away from the window. Sometimes hurt people hurt other people, mi amor. Not on my watch, Lavi declared. She reached for her phone with determination, her arthritis-curved fingers punching in numbers she shouldn't have had. Lavi, no, Elena protested, realizing what the older woman was doing. But Lavi was already speaking, her voice clear and sharp. Mr. Whitlock? This is Laverne Rhodes. You remember me from the art sessions? Good. Now listen close, young man, because I'm only saying this once. Elena covered her face with her hands, but Lavi continued undeterred. You're up there in your tower, thinking you're protecting everyone by staying away. But let me tell you something. I spent 40 years as an army nurse. I've seen boys torn apart by bombs find the courage to walk again. I've watched mothers hold dying soldiers and still get up the next day to care for the living. She paused, her free hand reaching out to squeeze Elena's shoulder. You want to know what the difference is between those who heal and those who don't? It's not money. It's not safety. It's choosing to be brave when everything in you wants to hide. Through her fingers, Elena saw Joy lift her head, really listening for the first time in days. Right now, you're not being brave, Mr. Whitlock. You're being rich. And those aren't the same thing at all. Lavi's voice softened slightly. Stop letting fear make your choices, son. That family needs you. Not your money, you. She listened for a moment, then nodded. Good. That's better. Now what are you going to do about it? The silence in the kitchen was absolute. Even Noah had stopped playing with his car, watching Lavi with wide eyes. Tomorrow morning? Yes, that would be appropriate. Lavi's face relaxed into a smile. And Mr. Whitlock? Bring yourself this time. Not your PR team. Not your lawyers. Just you. She hung up and turned to Elena, who was staring at her in shock. Lavi, Elena whispered. What did you do? The older woman just patted her hand. Sometimes the bravest need a little push. Now who wants cookies? I just baked a fresh batch. As Noah cheered and Joy managed a small smile, Elena glanced once more at the towering building outside. The lonely figure was gone from the window, but somehow the room looked less empty than before. Graham sat alone in his dimly lit office, the city lights twinkling outside his window like distant stars. His fingers hovered over the keyboard as security footage from the past month played across multiple screens. He hadn't slept properly in days, his usual crisp appearance showing signs of wear. His tie loosened, sleeves rolled up, and dark circles under his eyes. The braided cord bracelet on his wrist caught the blue light from the monitors. He touched it absently, remembering Elena's face when Joy had mentioned it. That memory led to others, each one aching with recent loss. "Show me the lobby footage again," he muttered to himself, rewinding to the day everything changed. The security cameras had captured multiple angles. On one screen, Elena's proud stance as she led her children toward the exit. On another, Noah's small figure looking up at him. Graham leaned forward, adjusting the volume. He'd watched this clip dozens of times, but something about Noah's posture had always seemed off. The boy wasn't looking at him when he spoke. He was staring at the bracelet, Graham whispered, zooming in. Noah's eyes were fixed on the braided cord, his little face scrunched in concentration. The whispered words came again through the speakers. "Mommy says you're my daddy." But there was something in the child's tone, not conviction, but repetition, like he was echoing words he'd heard elsewhere. Graham's hands flew across the keyboard, pulling up footage from earlier that week. There, Noah, in the playground behind their building, other children circling him. The audio was faint but clear enough. "Your mom works for his daddy. That makes him your daddy too." Taunts. Playground teasing that Noah, too young to understand, had simply repeated. Graham's chair scraped against the floor as he stood abruptly. He yanked his phone from his pocket, dialing Marla's number. When she answered, his voice was steel. "Get to my office, now, and bring your crisis team's records. All of them." While waiting, he dug deeper. Email trails, meeting minutes, surveillance footage of Anton having private conversations with board members. The truth emerged like a photograph developing in darkroom chemicals. Anton had seized on Noah's innocent words, working with Marla's discretion team to craft a narrative that would drive Elena away. Marla arrived 20 minutes later, clutching a tablet and wearing her usual professional mask. "Graham, it's late. What could possibly—" He cut her off by playing the playground footage. Her face blanched. "You knew," he said quietly. "You knew it was just children being cruel. And you let your team spin it into something ugly. We were protecting you," Marla started, but Graham slammed his hand on the desk. "Protecting me? By destroying an innocent family? By making Elena look like some kind of con artist?" His voice rose with each question. "Show me the original footage your team doctored." Marla's fingers trembled as she pulled up files on her tablet. Side by side, the truth was damning. Careful edits, subtle changes in timing, a manufactured story of manipulation where there had only been a child's confusion. "Anton came to me," Marla admitted finally. "He said having them around was a liability, that the board was concerned about the building's reputation. We thought." "You thought wrong." Graham's words cut like ice. "Get your fixer in here, now." The next hour passed in a blur of confrontations. The fixer, a sleek woman in expensive shoes, tried to defend her work as standard reputation management. Graham fired her on the spot. Marla began a careful explanation of optics and necessary evils until Graham raised his hand for silence. "You're suspended, effective immediately. Clear your desk tonight. The board will review your position next quarter." He turned to his computer, pulling up his email. "And Marla, if I find out you've spoken to Anton before I do, your suspension becomes permanent." She left, without another word, her heels clicking a retreat across the marble floor. Graham sat back, running his hands over his face. The evidence was clear now. Anton's quiet campaign of exclusion, the whispered concerns to board members, the strategic leak of the doctored video. All designed to maintain the building's prestigious character by driving out the people who had made Graham feel truly at home for the first time in years. He pulled up the building's security protocols on his screen, typing quickly. Within minutes, Anton's access codes were suspended. Next came a series of emails, one to his lawyers, one to the board calling an emergency meeting, and one that he started and stopped multiple times to Elena. How could he explain? How could he make this right? The bracelet caught his eye again. He remembered Elena's dignity in the face of discrimination, Joy's pure talent and kind heart, Noah's innocent confusion. They deserved more than emails and apologies. Graham stood, gathering the evidence into a folder. Tomorrow, he would confront Anton directly. Tomorrow, he would begin to fix what his silence and fear had broken. But tonight, he had to find the words to reach across the chasm his wealth and position had allowed others to create. He glanced at the security footage one last time, Noah staring at his bracelet, repeating words he'd never understood, while Elena stood proud and protective beside him. Graham had let others twist that moment into something ugly. Now it was time to restore its truth. The Community Arts Center buzzed with nervous energy on a bright Tuesday morning. Metal folding chairs squeaked against the worn wooden floor as local reporters settled in, their cameras aimed at the simple podium set up beneath Joy's Faces That Build portraits. The space felt different from Graham's usual corporate press venues, humbler, more honest somehow. Pastor Miller stood near the entrance, hands clasped in silent prayer. Lavi sat in the front row, her silver hair neatly pinned back, her expression fierce and proud. Other familiar faces from the neighborhood filled the seats, the janitor Joy had sketched, delivery drivers, nurses still in scrubs from night shifts. Graham entered through the side door, foregoing his usual power suit for a simple navy blazer and that ever-present braided bracelet. His PR team had strongly advised against this, against all of it, but he'd left them behind in their glass tower. This wasn't about image anymore. He approached the podium, adjusting the microphone with steady hands. Camera shutters clicked rapidly. The room fell silent, waiting. "Thank you for coming," Graham began, his voice carrying clearly through the space. "I've called this press conference to address recent events concerning Elena Cruz, her children, and the viral video that's caused so much pain." He pulled a USB drive from his pocket, holding it up. "This contains security footage from my building, showing the full, unedited interaction with Noah Cruz. It proves conclusively that the video circulating online was doctored, spliced together from different moments to create a false narrative." The reporters stirred, pens scratching against notepads. "The truth is simple," Graham continued. "A young boy repeated something he'd heard at school. There was no coaching, no scheme, no attempt at exploitation. Elena Cruz is a woman of integrity who has worked multiple jobs to support her children. She never sought publicity or payment." His voice grew stronger, touched with carefully controlled anger. "The edited video was created and distributed by individuals within my own organization, working with members of the condo board who objected to Elena's presence in our building. Those responsible have been removed from their positions, and legal action is pending." A reporter's hand shot up. "Mr. Whitlock, what about the DNA test?" Graham met the question directly. "The test confirmed I am not Noah's biological father. That fact changes nothing about the wrong done to this family. My delay in defending them publicly was a moral failure on my part. I let fear of scandal override what I knew was right, and I apologize to Elena, Joy, and Noah for that weakness." He drew a deep breath, squaring his shoulders. "But today isn't just about clearing names. It's about building something better from this mess." Graham gestured to a large envelope on the podium. "I'm announcing the creation of the Whitlock Neighborhood Arts Trust, with an initial endowment of $50 million. This trust will support arts education, community spaces, and affordable housing initiatives throughout the city." Cameras flashed rapidly as he continued. "Unlike my other philanthropic ventures, this trust will be governed entirely by a community board. Pastor Miller, Mrs. Lavender Washington, and other neighborhood leaders will control its direction and decisions. My company will have no voting power or control over its operations." He pulled out several documents, displaying them. "The paperwork is already filed. The trust's first project will be purchasing and renovating several buildings for mixed-income housing, ensuring that working families can afford to live in the neighborhoods they help build." More hands rose, but Graham held up his own to stop the questions. "One final point. Throughout this ordeal, I've heard the word family used as a weapon to exclude, to judge, to separate people by class or status. That ends today." His voice softened, becoming more personal. "I grew up poor. The first time I walked into a building like my tower, I was wearing borrowed clothes to interview as a janitor. The man who hired me became my mentor. He taught me that family isn't about blood or bank accounts." Graham's fingers brushed his bracelet. "Family is who you protect, who you stand beside when others step away, who you choose again and again, even when it's hard." He straightened, looking directly into the cameras. "Elena Cruz and her children have taught me more about family in these past months than I learned in all my years of acquiring wealth. They showed me that true worth isn't measured in dollars, but in the courage to remain dignified when wronged, to create beauty from pain, and to love without guarantee." The room had grown completely still, every eye fixed on Graham as he concluded. "I failed to protect them once. I won't make that mistake again." He met each camera's lens steadily. "Family is who you protect, and I know exactly who my family is." The press erupted with questions, but Graham simply nodded once and stepped away from the podium. As he walked off the small stage, Lavi reached out and squeezed his hand. Pastor Miller's eyes shone with tears. Through the art center's windows, morning sunlight fell across Joy's portraits. The janitor's kind smile, the delivery woman's determined stance, the nurse's gentle hands. And there in the center, Graham's own face, no longer lonely but surrounded by his chosen family of everyday heroes. Early Sunday morning sunlight streamed through the stained glass windows of First Community Church, casting rainbow patterns across the worn wooden pews. Elena smoothed Noah's unruly hair one last time before guiding him and Joy through the familiar double doors. Her shoulders were tense, but she held her head high as they made their way to their usual spot, 5 rows from the front, just behind Mrs. Henderson and her flowery hats. Joy clutched her choir folder close to her chest, the edges slightly crumpled from nervous fingers. She wore her best blue dress, the one Elena had carefully ironed the night before. Noah fidgeted with his clip-on tie, making quiet, vrooming sounds as he played with a tiny car in his pocket. "Remember," Elena whispered, helping Noah with the hymnal, "we stand for the first song." The organ hummed to life, its deep notes filling the sanctuary. That's when Elena felt it. A slight shift in the air, a rustling near the back of the church. She didn't need to turn around to know who had slipped into the last pew. Her heart skipped, but she kept her eyes forward, squeezing Noah's small hand. When it was time for the children's choir, Joy joined the other young singers at the front. Lavi stood beside them, her gentle hands guiding their rhythm. Joy's voice, usually shy and soft, lifted clear and true among the others. Elena noticed how her daughter's eyes darted occasionally to the back of the church, a small smile playing at her lips. "Jesus loves the little children," they sang, "all the children of the world." Noah swayed in his seat, mouthing the words he knew. Elena felt tears prick at her corners of her eyes, remembering all the Sundays they'd spent here, through hard times and good, through lonely dinners and tight budgets. The church had always been their constant. After the final hymn and benediction, the congregation moved toward the fellowship hall, drawn by the smell of coffee and Mrs. Martinez's famous cinnamon rolls. Elena hesitated, but Noah was already tugging her forward, eager for treats. The fellowship hall buzzed with Sunday morning conversation. Elderly deacons discussed the sermon over steaming cups of coffee. Children darted between tables, paper plates of donut holes in hand. Joy had joined her choir friends near the piano, their robes shed, giggling over shared secrets. That's when Graham approached, his expensive suit looking somehow softer in the warm church light. He carried himself differently here, less the towering billionaire, more just another soul-seeking connection. His eyes met Elena's briefly, asking silent permission. She nodded, just slightly. Graham knelt down to Noah's eye level, his movements careful and deliberate. The boy stopped mid-bite of his donut, powdered sugar dusting his chin. "Noah," Graham said gently, "I wanted to talk to you about something important." Noah tilted his head, studying Graham's face with that direct, unfiltered gaze that only children possess. "Is it about being my daddy?" Elena's breath caught, but Graham's voice remained steady, kind. "Yes, buddy. You see, I'm not your daddy by blood. That means I wasn't there when you were born." Noah considered this, his small forehead wrinkling in thought. "Like how Tommy has a different daddy than his sister." "Something like that." Graham smiled. "But I want you to know something very special. Even though I'm not your daddy by blood, I can still be your friend. I can be a Mr. Graham who shows up, who cares about you and Joy and your mom. Would that be okay?" The fellowship hall seemed to grow quieter, though conversations continued around them. Elena watched her son process this adult truth with his pure, 5-year-old heart. "Does showing up mean you'll come see my room? And play cars?" Noah asked, hope creeping into his voice. Graham's eyes crinkled at the corners. "If your mom says it's okay, I'd love to do those things." Noah brightened, practically bouncing on his toes. "Can you show up on Tuesdays for pizza?" The tension in Elena's shoulders melted as she watched Graham's face light up with genuine joy. Here, surrounded by the warmth of their church family, old hurts began to heal. Joy drifted over from her friends, slipping her small hand into Elena's. Graham extended his hand to Noah, as serious as any business deal. "Tuesday pizza sounds perfect, buddy." Noah grabbed Graham's hand with both of his, shaking it enthusiastically and sending a shower of powdered sugar everywhere. "It's a deal. Mommy makes the best pizza, and I help with the cheese, and Joy makes the sauce all neat and tidy." Elena watched as her son chatted animatedly with Graham, listing all his favorite toppings and the proper way to eat crust. Around them, the fellowship hall hummed with life. Lavi, directing the cleanup of choir robes. Pastor Miller, sharing coffee with elderly Mrs. Wu. Children darting between adults' legs with paper airplanes. In this moment, Elena saw clearly what they could be. Not a traditional family, perhaps, but something just as precious. Something chosen. Something built on truth and trust, rather than obligation or blood. Her children had somehow known it first, she realized. Joy with her perceptive heart capturing Graham's loneliness in her art. Noah with his simple acceptance of love in whatever form it took. And now, here was Graham, the billionaire from the penthouse, kneeling on a church fellowship hall floor, covered in donut sugar, making pizza plans with her son. The morning sun streamed through the high windows, warming the simple space. Joy leaned against Elena's side, watching her brother and Graham with quiet contentment. For the first time in weeks, the future didn't feel like something to fear. It felt like an open door, inviting them to step through together. The aroma of melted cheese and tomato sauce filled Elena's small apartment as she set out paper plates on the coffee table. Joy had pushed aside her homework to make room for the steaming pizza boxes Graham was carrying through the door. The usual tension in Elena's shoulders had softened, replaced by a gentle smile as she watched Noah bounce excitedly on the worn couch cushions. "Can we have the pepperoni one first?" Noah called out, his eyes wide at the stack of boxes. "Please, Mr. Graham." Graham set the pizzas down carefully, his expensive suit jacket draped over one arm. He looked different here, more relaxed than in his penthouse, like he could breathe easier in this cramped but cozy space. "How about we let your mom decide the order?" Graham suggested, winking at Elena. "She's the boss around here." Elena laughed, a real laugh that reached her eyes. "Since when has anyone been the boss of pizza night?" She opened the first box, releasing another wave of mouth-watering scent. "Everyone grab what you want." Joy settled cross-legged on the floor, carefully selecting a slice with extra cheese. She had changed out of her school uniform into comfortable pajamas decorated with little stars. Her sketchbook lay nearby, but tonight it stayed closed. She was too busy living the moment to draw it. "The Cartoon Channel is having a special on old shows," Noah announced importantly, already halfway through his first slice. Pizza sauce dotted his chin. "Can we watch, Mommy?" Elena grabbed a napkin and dabbed at Noah's face. "Of course, Maijo. Mr. Graham, are you okay with cartoons?" Graham had taken a seat in their one armchair, his tie loosened and sleeves rolled up. "Are you kidding? I haven't watched cartoons in years. This is a treat." The TV flickered to life, filling the small living room with bright colors and silly voices. Noah provided running commentary on every character, while Joy occasionally corrected his mixed-up plot explanations. Graham listened intently, as if Noah's rambling thoughts on talking sponges were the most fascinating business presentation he'd ever heard. Elena watched them from her perch on the couch's arm, something warm and peaceful settling in her chest. The fear that had gripped her for so long, of letting anyone too close, of what others might whisper, felt distant now. Here was a man who could have hosted them in luxury, but chose to squeeze into their tiny apartment, eating take-out pizza off paper plates and laughing at children's shows. "Oh," Joy exclaimed during a commercial break, "I forgot to show you my science project grade." She darted to her backpack, returning with a slightly crumpled paper marked with a bright red A. Graham's face lit up. "That's fantastic. The volcano experiment worked then?" "Perfect eruption," Elena confirmed, remembering the mess of baking soda and vinegar on her kitchen counter. "Though I'm still finding red food coloring in surprising places." "The best experiments always leave a mark," Graham said sagely, making Noah giggle. As the evening wore on, they fell into an easy rhythm. Noah dozed off against Graham's arm, pizza sauce still faintly visible despite Elena's best efforts with the napkin. Joy sketched quietly, the sound of her pencil mixing with the TV's soft murmur. Elena found herself sharing stories she usually kept close, about her first job in America, about teaching herself English from children's books, about the kind stranger at church who had helped her when Noah was born. Graham listened without judgment, occasionally offering his own memories of struggling through night school while working days. "Sometimes," Elena admitted, gathering empty pizza boxes, "I felt like I had to be made of steel. Never bend, never break. Never let anyone see a crack." She paused, looking at her sleeping son. "But maybe it's okay to just be human sometimes." Graham nodded, understanding in his eyes. "Steel's strong, but it's rigid. Humans bend. We adapt. We heal." He glanced around the apartment, taking in the carefully mended curtains, the second-hand furniture arranged with pride, the children's artwork brightening every wall. "You've built something beautiful here, Elena. Something real." Joy looked up from her drawing. "And now you're part of it," she said simply, with a child's direct wisdom. Elena felt tears prick her eyes, but for once she didn't fight them. These weren't tears of worry or frustration, they were tears of gratitude, of release. God had sent not just help, but understanding, not just support, but genuine care. When it was time for Graham to leave, Noah stirred just enough to mumble a sleepy goodbye. Joy gave him a quick hug before returning to help Elena with the cleanup. At the door, Graham paused, looking back at the scene of comfortable disorder. Pizza boxes stacked for recycling, Noah's toy cars scattered under the coffee table, Joy's pencils rolling across her sketchbook. "Thank you," he said softly, "for letting me be here, just here, like this." Elena smiled, no longer worried about who might see or what they might think. "Come back next Tuesday?" she offered. "I think pizza night needs a fourth person." After Graham left, Elena stood in her quiet apartment. Joy had taken Noah to brush his teeth, and the cartoon channel played on mute. She closed her eyes, whispering a prayer that rose from her heart like a released breath. "Thank you, Lord," she murmured, "for teaching me that family can grow in unexpected ways. Thank you for showing me that it's safe to open the door." The sound of her children's laughter drifted from the bathroom, and Elena smiled. Tonight, she would sleep peacefully, knowing that sometimes the best answers to prayer came bearing pizza and wearing $1,000 suits that didn't mind pizza sauce stains. Sunlight streamed through the large windows of Elena's new apartment, painting warm rectangles across freshly painted walls. The space wasn't enormous, but compared to their old place, it felt like a palace. 3 bedrooms, a real dining area, and, most precious of all, a small art corner by the window where Joy could draw in natural light. Elena stood in the kitchen, running her hand along the smooth countertop. The rent was fair, set by the Whitlock Neighborhood Arts Trust to be affordable for working families. No special treatment, just dignity. That mattered to her more than the fresh paint or new appliances. "Mommy, look," Joy called from her room. "My drawings don't curl up in here." She was right. The climate control meant no more dampness warping her sketches. She had pinned several new pieces to her wall. The janitor who'd mentored Graham, the delivery woman who always remembered Noah's name, Lavi leading choir practice. Noah zoomed past, clutching his favorite toy car. "My room has space for a real desk," he announced for perhaps the 20th time that morning. "Can I do my homework there instead of the kitchen table?" Elena smiled, her heart full. "Yes, mijo. Just make sure you actually do the homework instead of playing with your cars." The doorbell chimed, a gentle sound, not the harsh buzz of their old apartment. Joy reached it first, throwing it open with characteristic enthusiasm. "Lavi!" Their neighbor stood in the doorway, holding an enormous pie that filled the hallway with the scent of cinnamon and apples. Her silver hair was tied back in its usual neat bun, and her eyes twinkled with mischief. "Well, look at this. Finally got my favorite family in a proper frame." Elena moved to help with the pie, but Lavi shooed her away. "I've been carrying pies since before you were born, child. Now where's that lovely kitchen I've been hearing about?" They settled around the new dining table, a housewarming gift from the church community. Lavi served generous slices of pie, while Noah regaled her with a detailed tour report of every corner of their new home. "And my ceiling doesn't have any water spots?" he declared proudly. "That's because this building is maintained properly," Lavi noted, giving Elena a meaningful look. "By people who care about their tenants." Joy had brought her sketchbook to the table, adding gentle lines to a new drawing. Elena glimpsed familiar faces emerging on the page. Their little family, Lavi, Graham, all gathered around this very table. The artist's smile was soft but sure, nothing like the uncertain frown she'd worn during those difficult weeks. "The Trust is talking about adding art classes at the community center," Joy mentioned, not looking up from her work. "Pastor Miller asked if I'd help with the little kids' class." Elena's chest tightened with pride. Her daughter, who'd once hidden her drawings under her pillow, was growing into her gift with such grace. Lavi reached across the table to pat Joy's hand. "Teaching others is a fine way to multiply your blessings, child, though I suspect you've already taught quite a few people to see things differently." A warm breeze drifted through the open windows, carrying the sounds of the neighborhood, children playing in the courtyard, someone practicing piano, the distant bells of their church. Elena remembered Graham's words at the press conference. "Family is who you protect." But it was more than that, she realized. Family was also who you chose to become with, who you trusted with your growth. "Have you figured out where you'll hang the gallery piece?" Lavi asked, gesturing to the carefully wrapped canvas leaning against the wall. It was Joy's unlonely portrait, the one of Graham on the park bench, which he'd insisted belonged in their new home. "I think by the dining room," Elena said, "where everyone can see it during meals." Noah looked up from his second slice of pie. "Mr. Graham said he's still coming for Tuesday pizza, right? Even though we moved?" "Of course, mijo. He promised, didn't he?" Lavi's eyes crinkled with satisfaction. "That man keeps his promises now, though I suspect he needs these pizza nights as much as you all do." She stood to gather the plates, ignoring Elena's protests. "Now, let me help clean up, and then I want to see this art corner I've been hearing about." Joy bounced up, eager to show off her new creative space. She'd arranged her colored pencils in rainbow order, set up an easel by the window, and pinned inspiration photos all around. The sunlight caught the edge of her latest sketch, the beginning of what looked like a book illustration. "Is that for your picture book?" Lavi asked gently. Joy nodded. "Alone is a word we can fix. That's what we're calling it. Graham's writing the foreword." Elena watched her daughter explain the project, remembering the quiet girl who'd first drawn a lonely billionaire. Now here she was, collaborating on a book, teaching art, blooming in the light of acceptance and opportunity. "You know," Lavi said, settling into the comfortable window seat, "when I first moved to this neighborhood, people said it was too broken to fix. But I've learned that broken is just another word we can change, one heart at a time." She smiled at Elena. "One family at a time." Noah had disappeared into his room and returned with his treasure box, a shoebox filled with special things. He pulled out the first sketch Joy had ever drawn of Graham, now carefully preserved in a plastic sleeve. Can we hang this one too, Mommy? So we remember? Elena knelt beside him, touching the paper gently. Yes, mi amor. Some things should be remembered. Well, Lavi declared, standing up with the satisfaction of a woman who'd seen her prayers answered, this family is finally in the right frame, and this pie plate is empty, which means my work here is done. The community gallery buzzed with excitement, its freshly painted walls adorned with dozens of Joy's portraits from the Faces That Build series. Strings of warm lights crisscrossed the ceiling, casting a gentle glow over the gathered crowd. Children from the neighborhood art program darted between clusters of adults, their laughter mixing with the classical music playing softly in the background. Elena smoothed her simple navy dress, bought specially for the occasion, and watched Joy fidget near the covered easel at the front of the room. Her daughter wore a white blouse with small paint stains that wouldn't quite wash out, but Elena thought she had never looked more beautiful. Noah, for once staying still, held his sister's hand while wearing his fancy dinosaur t-shirt. Pastor Miller stepped to the microphone, tapping it gently. Friends and neighbors, he began, his voice warm and familiar. What a journey this has been. 6 months ago, a little girl with a big heart drew a picture of loneliness. Tonight, we celebrate how that single sketch brought our community together. Lavi, seated in the front row, dabbed at her eyes with a tissue. She had brought enough for the whole row, apparently expecting tears. Graham stood near the back, trying to blend in despite his height and tailored suit. Elena noticed how he kept fidgeting with his bracelet, that same braided cord that had first sparked her memories. He caught her eye and smiled, no longer the distant figure from magazine covers. And now, Pastor Miller continued, Joy Cruz would like to share her final piece in this series, which she's titled Unlonely. Joy stepped forward, her small hands gripping the cloth covering her latest work. She glanced at Elena, who nodded encouragingly, then at Graham, who gave her a gentle thumbs up. I drew this because... Joy's voice quivered, then steadied. Because sometimes family is bigger than we think, and sometimes lonely people just need to be seen. She pulled the cloth away. Gasps filled the room. On the canvas, Graham sat on a worn wooden park bench, Joy on one side and Noah on the other. But it wasn't just the perfect capture of their faces that made the piece special. Behind them, the city skyline glowed like a constellation of warm windows, each one representing a story, a life, a connection. The lights seemed to reach down and embrace the three figures on the bench, making them part of something larger than themselves. The detail was extraordinary. Graham's gentle smile as he looked down at the children, Joy's concentrated expression as she held up a sketchbook, Noah's unbridled joy as he pointed at something off canvas. Elena recognized the bench from their neighborhood park, where they now spent Sunday afternoons after church. Applause erupted, startling Joy, who had been anxiously watching for reactions. Several of the art program kids rushed forward to hug her, while Lavi distributed more tissues to the sniffling adults around her. Graham made his way through the crowd, stopping to shake hands and accept congratulations, but his eyes were fixed on the painting. When he reached Elena's side, his voice was thick with emotion. This feels like home, he whispered, just loud enough for her to hear. Elena understood. The painting captured not just faces, but the tender truth they'd discovered. Family could be chosen, could grow beyond blood and background, could heal old wounds with new joy. Noah tugged at Graham's sleeve, his Tuesday pizza buddy now, no confusion about titles needed. Did joy make you not lonely anymore? He asked with a child's directness. Graham knelt down, his eyes bright. You all did, buddy. You and Joy and your mom. You helped me remember what matters most. The gallery director called for attention, announcing the formal dedication of the space as a permanent home for community art programs. Elena barely heard the words over the rhythm of her own heart, steady and sure. She felt Graham's hand slip into hers, warm and familiar now. She squeezed back, neither rushing nor retreating, just choosing. This moment, this family, this life they were building together, one sketch, one Tuesday pizza night, one quiet understanding at a time. Joy bounced over to them, her face glowing with pride as more people gathered around her painting. Do you really like it? She asked Graham. "It's perfect," he answered, his voice catching. "You saw us all exactly as we are." The city lights in the painting seemed to pulse with life, each window a heartbeat, each glow a promise. Elena looked at her daughter's work and saw their story captured in careful strokes. The lonely man in the tower, the cautious single mother, the children who built a bridge between them with nothing but truth and trust and crayon-stained fingers. Standing there, surrounded by their newfound community, Elena squeezed Graham's hand again. The gesture said everything that needed saying about choice and trust, and the courage to let love grow slowly, surely, in its own perfect time. The gallery doors closed behind them as they stepped into the crisp evening air. Street lamps cast pools of golden light along the sidewalk, and above them, skyscrapers sparkled against the dark sky. Elena pulled her light jacket closer, grateful for the warmth after the air-conditioned gallery. Joy skipped ahead, her patent leather shoes clicking against the concrete. She twirled occasionally, still riding the high of her successful show, her blue dress spinning like a flower. Noah trudged beside her, tired but content, his dinosaur t-shirt slightly rumpled from the long evening. Graham walked beside Elena, his suit jacket draped casually over one arm. The silence between them felt comfortable now, nothing like those first awkward moments months ago. They passed the old church where it had all started, its stained glass windows dark but still beautiful. "Remember when you wouldn't even look at me?" Graham asked softly, glancing at Elena with a gentle smile. "Back when I was just the lonely man in the penthouse?" Elena laughed quietly. "I remember being terrified you'd notice me at all." She watched Joy stop to examine a flower pushing through a crack in the sidewalk. "Now look at us." A delivery truck rumbled past, its headlights sweeping across them, the sound of distant sirens mixed with music drifting from a nearby restaurant. Their city, their home, lived and breathed around them, no longer a place of isolation but one of connection. Noah began to lag behind, his small legs tired from standing during the gallery show. Without hesitation, Graham scooped him up, settling the boy against his shoulder. Noah snuggled close, his eyes heavy with sleep. "Mr. Graham?" Noah mumbled against his collar. "Yes, buddy? Can we have pancakes tomorrow? The ones with chocolate chips?" Graham caught Elena's eye, seeking permission. She nodded, her heart warming at their easy interaction. "Of course we can," he answered, "but only if you help mix the batter." They turned down Elena's street, where the Trust's apartment building stood welcoming and familiar. Window boxes full of flowers decorated the front, Lavi's idea to make it feel more like home. A few neighbors waved from their balconies, no longer strangers but friends. Joy ran ahead to press the elevator button, bouncing on her toes as she waited for them. "Did you see how many people came tonight?" she asked, her eyes bright. "And they all liked my drawings." "They loved them," Elena corrected, stepping into the elevator. "Because you showed them the truth about our city, that we're all connected, all important." The elevator carried them to their floor, its soft hum a familiar comfort. Noah had dozed off on Graham's shoulder, his small hands still clutching Graham's shirt. As they approached their door, the boy stirred slightly. "Down, please," he mumbled, rubbing his eyes as Graham set him gently on his feet. Then, in that simple way children have of speaking life-changing truths, Noah reached for Graham's hand. His small fingers wrapped around Graham's larger ones, natural as breathing. "You're not my daddy," he whispered, a sleepy smile on his face. "You're my always." The words hung in the hallway like a blessing. Elena felt tears well up in her eyes as she watched Graham kneel down to Noah's level, his own eyes suspiciously bright. Here was the man who had everything except what mattered most, finally finding his place not in wealth or status, but in the simple love of a child. She touched Graham's shoulder gently. "Ours," she said, her voice soft but certain. Joy moved closer, completing their circle in the quiet hallway. Outside, the city continued its eternal dance of lights and shadows, but in this moment they were wrapped in something precious and real. The loneliness that had first drawn Joy's pencil to paper had transformed into belonging, not through obligation or blood, but through the daily choice to love and stay. Graham stood slowly, keeping hold of Noah's hand. The bracelet on his wrist caught the light. That same braided cord that had once been a mystery now, a symbol of their intertwined lives. Noah yawned widely, tugging them toward the door. Above them, the city's towers reached toward the stars, their windows glowing like countless candles in the night. But the real light was here, in this hallway, where four people who had once been strangers now stood together, unlonely, unafraid, and finally, completely home. What would you do if you were in their place? Comment your answer below, and let's see how you'd rewrite the ending. If you enjoyed the story of Elena Cruz, I handpicked the next story that you will enjoy. Please don't miss this one. Click here to watch it.